shelters. In total, we're talking about Hezbollah sending over the course of a 24-hour period so far around 200 rockets, 20 drones, and there were some direct hits that we saw. Luckily, nobody was majorly injured. There were no serious injuries in this attack, but there was a situation, for example, where one of those rockets fell directly on a house in northern Israel. The house was completely destroyed, barring the safe room. It was an elderly woman and her aide. They had 90 seconds to get into that safe room and managed to do so, thereby saving their lives. Magen David Adom also talked about treating two other people, a woman in around 35, a man in his 50s, with some more mild injuries throughout the night. And Hezbollah actually said that they were targeting the Glilot base, that's an 8,200 intelligence base that's in central Israel, that was one of their aims overnight.
Well, first of all, that's why it's so important to listen and to adhere to the home front command guidelines, that they were able to make it into the bomb shelter and essentially spare their lives. But, 100 missiles fired randomly at northern Israel. They were clearly aiming for civilians there. I want to ask also, you're in Jerusalem. There was also a siren there this morning. What's the mood right now in the city?
Certainly. So unfortunately, there wasn't just one siren. There were multiple. In fact, Jerusalem last night received a siren. Then we were woken up again in the middle of the night and also this morning. Now, one of those attacks actually led to some shrapnel falling down into the city. There's actually a very it's an uncanny video of in the ultra-Orthodox community of some young men, again, not following restrictions, being outside on the road, looking up as the rockets are being intercepted and then running for their lives as the shrapnel drops down. And so, again, that does really push, again, what you said, the Home Front Command has directives. Right now, it is very important to stay within walking distance of a shelter. We've had some close calls in recent days where the warning siren that comes before the actual siren letting you know the rockets are falling down have not gone off. And remember, for Hezbollah, unlike for Iran, we don't have nearly as much time. So it's very important to get to those shelters and to be there on time. Here in Jerusalem, it's still a ghost town. People have gone back to work, but the roads are pretty empty. People aren't out and about the way you would, have in a normal afternoon, especially on a Thursday.
Absolutely. And we do know that Home Front Command eased some of the guidelines, especially in central Israel, opening workplaces. And we spoke about the possibility of children returning to school because schools are still closed. But with all of these rocket attacks in the north and these coordinated attacks now between Hezbollah and Iran, is that conversation starting to change at all?
Yeah, unfortunately, for those of us that have children, that conversation has changed a lot. So it was last Thursday that the Home Front Command, in conjunction with the Finance Ministry, made a decision to allow people to go back to work if they were able to be in smaller numbers. And of course, if there was a safe room available, inside their place of work. And that's caused a lot of challenges for parents, especially parents of small children. Rockets are still going off. We talked about all the sirens just in the last day. And so they're then either going to have to leave those children at home or find alternatives because there are no preschools in a school. Now, the understanding was that perhaps by the beginning of next week, some schools would open. But we heard today from Education Minister Yoav Kish that while by maybe Monday, not Sunday, but Monday, remember Sunday here is a school day, that some children in southern and potentially Jerusalem, southern Israel and Jerusalem, may start to make their ways back to school. But certainly in the north and in central Israel, he has already let us know that we're talking about at least another week, meaning all next week, those children will still be learning on Zoom.
On Zoom brings us back to the days of the coronavirus. I think parents across the world remember the challenges of Zoom. Parents still continuing to face that here in Israel. Maayan Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us and for the update.
Thanks, Vidar.
And meanwhile, residents across northern Israel, including the Galilee and Golan, have been urged to stay near shelters, with local councils and mayors issuing special instructions to minimize time outdoors and avoid social gatherings. Even ahead of last night's massive barrage on the north, and since the war began, Israel has identified more than 450 launches from Lebanon, 250 from Iran, and over 200 drone attacks combined. Home Front Commander Shai Klepel said this to the residents of northern Israel.
עברנו לילה מאתגר עם מספר אזעקות. אזרחי ישראל בכלל ותושבי הצפון בפרט. עברנו למעלה משנתיים וחצי, שנתיים מורכבות ומאתגרות. פיקוד העורף פרוס בפריסה ארצית רחבה ופועל בשיתוף פעולה עם כלל ארגוני החירום, עם משטרת ישראל, עם קב"א ועם מד"א ועם הרשויות המקומיות. מתוך זה עליתי היום צפונה לשבת עם הרשויות המקומיות ולפגוש בהנהגה ובציבור. פגשתי הנהגה אחראית, מקצועית ואמיצה שמפגינה חוסן בלתי רגיל. אני מודע לאתגרים שהמציאות הביטחונית מציבה לנו.
And joining us now with more on the situation in the north is Josia Dekanu, a resident of Netua. Josia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So a very difficult night for the residents of the north. First of all, how are you doing? How's your family doing?
So it's been a bit sleepless over the last, well, for the whole war. Last night, no sleep at all. You could probably see it from the bags under my eyes. She mentioned that the northern kids are going to school via Zoom, right? Even today, Zoom was canceled because no one got any sleep up here. So it's been extremely tough.
Absolutely. And what's the situation been in the area so far today? We know last night you saw hundreds of rockets. What's it been like today?
So today's been a bit quieter than, well, certainly than last night. Last night's barrage, as she said, it was a coordinated attack from Iran and Hezbollah. I believe the numbers, it's really hard for us to tell. You mentioned that 100 rockets landed, or 100 rockets were fired by Lebanon. I think it felt like that many in the first 3 hours from like 8 to 11. I was standing outside, and we're so close. By the way, I'm 1 kilometer away from the border. I can see the border out a window, out my living room windows. So we don't have 90 seconds or 60 seconds, but we're so close. There are times when we can distinguish explosions and determine, we can actually hear the launches from Hezbollah before the sirens go off. Today it's been a little bit quieter. Of course, the other thing to mention is the hostile aircraft keeps us on our toes. It comes across often right at Strula, which is about a mile away from me. And then we have to track it. I mean, we move immediately very quickly to a safe zone or a safe area. If it takes a left, it's heading right over our house. So it's chaos.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and you said, here in central Israel, we have 90 seconds to make our way into the bomb shelter. How much time do you have once you hear that siren, or once you hear sort of the, as you said, the launch?
So Homefront Command says immediate. We went through this throughout the whole October 7th war. I would say we have 8 to 10 seconds. We stay very, very close. I mean, Eitat Sha'ab, which is a headquarters of Hezbollah, is 3 to 5 miles from my house. And when we can hear them launch, that actually gives us a couple more seconds. So it's fast. It's very, very quick. We stay, this is a safe room down here. Sorry about the mess. Our other safe room upstairs is a bedroom, and that's where the kids and everybody sleep. But we have probably about 8 to 10 seconds.
That's really just unfathomable, even, for people in central Israel. 8 to 10 seconds. I want our viewers to just let that sink in for a minute. 8 to 10 seconds. You hear that siren. You have to run like hell into the bomb shelter, or basically stay in the bomb shelter for extended periods of time, because 8 to 10 seconds is really it's nothing to make your way into the bomb shelter. And I want to ask, all of this going on, what's the mood like in the north right now? I mean, how are you feeling? How are people in your community feeling? What's the mood like there?
So, like I said, we went through this for 14 months. Most of us up here was evacuated. I stayed up here to help out some of the elderly folks and the civil defense folks and that kind of stuff. We believe this has to happen. I think I'm speaking on behalf of the entire northern residents when I say that we knew that once, whether Israel was involved or not, once the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, Hezbollah was going to engage, and we were right. And I have folks like my mother. My mother says, I'm praying for a ceasefire. And I say, Mom, pray for safety, pray for peace. We should have finished the job at the end of the last one, and we know the only way we're going to have safety on this border is if we dismantle Hezbollah, get some agreement. We need a friendly border up there, and we have friends up there, and I would like to see that nurtured. But it has to be. We can't live with 100,000 rockets being able to fire at us at any given time.
I mean, residents of the North, as you mentioned, I mean, you spent about 14 months, nearly 2 years evacuated from your homes. Many have returned. They've just sort of adjusted back to life in their homes. And again, now you're experiencing these missile barrages. Are people once again considering leaving or considering relocating for the duration of this war or permanently?
So this town is a very small farming town, about 300 people prior to the first war, or prior to the war of October 7th. Maybe 200 of them have come back. Now they're fleeing again. It's different now because when we were evacuated somewhere around 11 days after the first war, now we're not evacuated or officially evacuated. People have businesses and mortgages and these kind of things. So it's a little bit different because there's women and children here. I would say that many have left. But that 1/3 of the population, the 100 people that didn't return, they went for 14 months, evacuated, and found a different life. And that's really sad, where we're in jeopardy of losing the North, not necessarily to Hezbollah directly, but just how can we live with this, right? And folks are finding it easier to live further away, whether that's 30 seconds to a bomb shelter or 90 seconds to a bomb shelter. This is a pretty tragic lifestyle when it kicks off.
Well, certainly every second makes a difference. And I want to ask, if you have a message for the state of Israel, for the government of Israel today, what would that message be?
Well, I probably already said it. I have all the respect in the world for the IDF. I really, really do. And they keep us safe, and they kept us safe. And the one thing that's been a threat up here, especially during the last war, was I'm a mile away from Gesher Ben, where there's potential incursion. The military is far more prepared this time. I was up when there was a threat. I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday morning, and the military's response was extraordinarily quick. But that's the other thing. It's not just the sirens that keep us awake, because we're sitting here hearing the not only the jets, the explosions and reactions of the IDF, the artillery fire, and these kind of things, which is a good thing, that they're punching back. But we don't want to give up the North, and there's some very stubborn people up here, and I'm one of them.
Absolutely, showing incredible resilience. Josie, I want to thank you for joining us today, sending you a lot of support, a lot of strength from here in Tel Aviv.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance to share our side of it.
And stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unbelievable what the residents of the North are going through. And today, the war with Iran has entered its 13th day, with Israel carrying out some of its most direct strikes yet inside the Iranian capital. The IDF says dozens of Air Force fighter jets struck key regime targets across Tehran and western Iran, including Revolutionary Guard Air Force headquarters, command and control centers, ballistic missile storage sites, and air defense positions. Israel also released footage it says shows fighter jets striking Iranian soldiers operating at an IRGC headquarters in central Tehran, with the military saying the forces were identified and eliminated within moments. The IDF also struck a compound inside the IRGC's central military university known as Imam Hussein, which the IDF says was being used by regime forces to coordinate operations and hold command meetings. The military also struck storage and production sites for ready-to-launch ballistic missiles. including missiles intended to target Israeli aircraft operating over Iran. And at the same time, Israel is now targeting internal security forces, including besieged bases and the headquarters of Iran's intelligence ministry. These are the regime's primary domestic surveillance and repression agencies. Iran's semi-official media reports several besieged and security personnel were killed at checkpoints in northern and southern Tehran. The IDF says the strikes are part of a new phase of the campaign aimed at, quote, deepening the blow to the core systems of the Iranian regime. And so joining us now with more on the latest in the war are Brigadier General Harel Knafo, former Chief of Staff of Southern Command, and Dr. Eric Mandel, founder and director of MEPIN, joining us from the United States. Harel, let's start with you. Today is the 13th day, one more day than the last war with Iran in June, the 12-day war. What is your assessment of the war so far?
Well, first of all, I think that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu said everything very clearly. We are going according to the plan, and even we are more advanced than we should be on that day. And I would say that all the air defense systems of the Iranian exploded. Everything was that connected to the nuclear of the Iranian regime exploded. They have no more Air Force. They have no more Marine Corps. They have no more any kind of those strategic branches in their military forces. I think that most of the missiles and the launchers are already destroyed. They have a few, of course, more, but as you can see, maybe they can coordinate with Hezbollah, but they can coordinate 10 missiles from their side and not 300 like it used to be in the first days or in the last war with Iran. So basically, even in those matters, they have almost nothing left. What they have now is that they can, in some way, control or make it harder to the boats of the world to get through the Hormuz Strait. They can continue to bomb all the, Emirates, Qatar, all the Gulf states, and they can also kill their own people. If something has happened, they can say we will die with everyone else, and they can kill their own nation to make pressure over the world to stop their war. So they don't have too much. If you ask me what we should do, we should control.
So I want to stop you there, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But before we continue, because you raised so many different points, and I want to get into each and every one of them separately. But I do want to turn for a second to Dr. Mandel, to Eric. You heard what Harel said. Do you share that assessment? I mean, how is this war looking from the United States?
I don't think we should confuse the unprecedented cooperation between the United States and Israel and the unbelievable tactical accomplishments with a strategic victory here. I think we're moving now into a war of attrition. I think Iran's strategy is to still stretch this war out. They know the longer this goes, the longer the president will become impatient. The president is already looking for exit ramps. The Iranian strategy is to make the American domestic economy and the world economy bad. Obviously, what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz is a big part of it. I think that the quantity of missiles that they're sending at the UAE is designed to make them run out of interceptors. And I do believe they have a strategy to conserve their decreasing amount of munitions. And so if at the end of the day here, we have a wounded animal of Iran left, It is, and even if the regime collapses more, the IRGC is the most likely to still pick up the pieces here. So I'm more cautious because how Israelis feel overwhelmingly and how Americans feel in a polarized a country that is in an election year. You saw the president yesterday in Kentucky campaigning and talking about Iran at the same time. I do not think it's inevitable here that there's any quick victory with Iran and America's staying power. We really don't know. But the bottom line here is when the president says this war is over, however he thinks of it, however he declares a victory, Israel will have to stop. And that's why Israel at this point tactically has to go full speed ahead. I will say just regarding, I spent a lot of time up north. I've been up the north 9 times since October 2023. And I feel for the people from the Western Galilee to the Northern Galilee. But the president seems to be totally on board right now with a Israeli ground incursion in Lebanon. And if that's what Israel wants, and I know they don't want to take their focus off Iran, but there is a window of opportunity to do this at this particular time.
And Harel, back to you. You were just about to say what you think that Israel should do. And I do want to ask, because we saw a really massive coordinated attack between Iran and its proxy, Hezbollah, last night, as you mentioned. What can we expect now moving forward in terms of Iran and Lebanon? I mean, is Israel heading into a ground invasion of Lebanon? As Eric just suggested, that even President Trump is now on board with such an option.
Well, first of all, you talked about condemnation. Just try to imagine 2.5 years ago, if it would have started when Iran is starting the war, and they still have Hamas in full power, Hezbollah in full power, they were in full power, and they will have also the umbrella of the nuclear weapons. Just think that this is the situation today, and think what has happened. And now we have to take things in proportion. Now we are in a very good situation, much better. Hamas cannot make any strategic influence. Hezbollah can do maybe tactical influence, and they can coordinate with the Iranian things, but it's a very small, almost nothing they can do with us.
Well, 100 rockets overnight. You mean we just heard from a resident in the north? They are being
what was the influence?
Essentially terrorized. Yes.
What was the influence of those 100 missiles besides of not letting the people sleep? Almost nothing. Almost none got hurt from it. Almost no houses, injuries. Almost nothing. So basically, it's nothing. I wouldn't say that it's not harming us. It's harming us, but it's not too much. And even if it will be for the next 2 weeks, it's really nothing in compare or in proportion to what are we doing to the other side. And you said, what can we do better? What I think is we have to strike more the Basij and the forces of Iran that preventing from people to go outside. And I think that we must to advance the things that will make the influence of the people of Iran from staying in their homes. I think there is something wrong with the broadcasting.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you just fine.
Okay.
You made an interesting point. I think that many of the residents of the North would agree with you that even if this takes another 2 weeks, they're willing to sacrifice those 2 weeks with missiles, and if that means long-term stability and peace and quiet on the border with Lebanon. Now, Eric, back to you. last week, and I think even just now you said here on ILTV that you believe Israel needs to focus on Iran, not get entangled in Lebanon, not to lose sight of sort of the bigger picture. But after the attack we saw last night, after this coordination between Hezbollah and Iran, do you still believe that to be the case?
Yeah, I would say this. I think that in Lebanon, what we should do, because our ground forces are not dealing with Iran now. They are pretty much not out of work, but pretty much they have reserve, so they can penetrate into Lebanon to some extent, and to make the land like it's between South Korea and North Korea, all without trees, without houses, without anything. That the site would be very clear, and everyone who will try to penetrate Israel will be viewed very easily. And the airstrikes should be even more inside Lebanon towards the targets that we have there. But we should not take anything from the Iranian side. I mean, everything that we do in Lebanon should be without harming our effort in Iran. Iran should stay the main goal of this war, because if Iran falls, the Hezbollah will fall by himself. We will not even have to do too much to make him fall. So we have to concentrate on Iran, and everything that United States needs from us in this effort, everything that the people in Iran need from us in this effort, we should do everything that we can so this regime will fall down.
And Eric, that question actually was meant for you. I do want to ask you what you think about that, because I know that you said as well that you think that Israel should focus on Iran, not get entangled in Lebanon. Did you change your mind now about that? And especially now that we see that Trump is on board with an invasion of Lebanon.
Right. So the situations every day is fluid, and things change. There is no doubt that Iran is the primary focus, and you don't want things that you do in Lebanon to distract from that. If Israel told hundreds of thousands of people everyone has to leave south of the Litani River, that change in focus at this point of time would not play well as America supports, and the world is basically either mute or somewhat supporting what Israel is doing in Iran. But we have to acknowledge that Hezbollah is there, and there is this window of opportunity where you do seem to have maybe the willingness of the Lebanese government to be against Hezbollah, but they're just not willing or capable yet. And if Israel can degrade Hezbollah to a certain level, it is possible that America can get coordination between the LAF and Israel. I mean, this may be a far stretch, but you don't want to end up at the end of this with Hezbollah again weakened and still in power, analogous to the IRGC weakened but still in power of the two. But there is, it really is a question for the IDF. Will they take away too many resources to do what they need to do in Lebanon? But I don't think you should minimize what's going on in Lebanon, because the Israeli people, I think, are being somewhat demoralized from 6,000 miles away here of what's going on there. I was with the 91st Division in January, who said that the expectation was that Hezbollah in the next outbreak of war would only attack the 5 bases that Israel has just on the inside of Lebanon. This obviously is not what has happened. They have been attacking civilians in Israel, and there should be not the mistake of removing the civilians, as was done in October 2023, with the fear of the Radwan forces coming in. But I think to leave Hezbollah aside at this point of time totally would be a mistake. But in the political realm, how far Israel goes could have negative implications that could reverberate to the cooperation that's going on in Iran. So again, this is 5-dimensional chess. This is not, but it should not be simple binary Iran or just Hezbollah. But Iran is certainly primary.
Absolutely. Iran, of course, being the head of the snake. And Harel, What is the situation now inside of Iran? You mentioned that Israel and the United States have been doing unprecedented damage to the regime in Iran. The IDF has also said it's entering a new phase, targeting, as you said, the internal repression forces, as we saw last night, drone strikes on besieged checkpoints throughout Tehran and around Iran. So what's your assessment on this front? I mean, what are the besiegers' capabilities right now? What will it take for Israel and the United States to be able to clear the path for the people of Iran to rise up and really sort of overthrow this regime? And is that even a real possibility?
It's very hard to say, because in some of the peripheries in Iran, we can see people who are going and do things against the Basij and against the other forces of the Iranian regime. Some of the places, youngsters, young soldiers are running off and save themselves. They are afraid that if the regime will stay, of course, they will harm their families. But at the end of the day, they are running out and leave their posts without nothing. But you cannot see military groups who are turning against the regime, and you are not seeing this collapsing of the regime in major places, especially not in Tehran. So I think we are still far from gaining this target, but we are on it, and I think that we are, and the Americans with us, we are doing anything that will reduce the power of this regime towards the people. But it's not the end. I mean, you cannot see effective opposition inside Iran. You cannot see effective opposition outside of Iran that you can take tomorrow and put it in. So it's not such a clear thing that happened. That's why I think that in one day, maybe not far from now, 2-3 weeks, someone will have to take over Hormuz Strait to minimize the damage of the economy of the world, and the rest will be in a chaos for 1, 2, 3 months until something will rebuild from it. Because if Hormuz will not be open, we will not have that much time towards the economy of the world if we will not do this thing. I would suggest another thing. Maybe the Americans can do it. You know, Abraham Accord had a security accord in it, and had also economic accord in it, which basically said we will make a corridor between Emirates, Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, towards Europe. And this is a very good opportunity to start this thing, maybe not with trains, and maybe not with a pipe, but with thousands of trailers that will take the gas and will take the oil, and start it today to make the first foundation of releasing all the world from the horror of the Iranian regime. And, you know, the history said that not only the Iranian regime now did those things. You know, the Shah, when he was in 71, he captured 3 islands of oil from United Emirates. One of them is Abu Musa. He took it. It wasn't a dark regime like now, but still there were interests in those places, and everyone does with the Eastern what he wants. If you are doing the economic Abraham Accords now, you started now, maybe in 2 years, you will not have any more those problems in this region.
An interesting and optimistic point. Eric, I do want to turn back to you. You know, President Trump said in recent days most of the targets in Iran have been struck. There really isn't that much left. He said, you know, the United States is exceeding its timeline, exceeding expectations. Here in Israel, it feels a little bit different, especially considering the night residents in the north and in the center have been experiencing the past couple nights. On the other hand, President Trump says the war will continue until all the objectives are met. He's focused right now on the Strait of Hormuz especially. But is there a concern President Trump could simply end this war prematurely? I mean, what's your assessment of that?
I think the president has given mixed messages. You know, on one hand, he says, I think he said the missions, the tactical missions were quote unquote complete. And then you'll hear from the Secretary of War, or at the times the president will say things that there's much more to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong in a fog of war here, making the Iranians not know what you want. But the Iranian strategy is they know that there is Western fatigue. America is a country that remembers the forever wars, and they think they can wait out the president here. I think there's been a profound change here, and it's been something I've been saying for years, is that the supreme leader, the new supreme leader, the son, is not in charge. And I know we haven't seen him, but I'm saying even if we physically saw him, who controls the country is the IRGC, which also controls the economy. And there are many people who are true believers who are there. And even if this regime collapses, that will make more instability in the Middle East. I'm not saying to stop, but we have to be realistic of what's here. And the president's patience will disappear at one point. And will the president allow Israel to continue on its own to do unilateral strikes? Because there is no doubt that these 12 Shiite jihadists are going to have a long vision of centuries, if you will, that they're going to eventually rebuild ballistic missile production, and they're going to go back to nuclear. And by the way, one of the things right now that's just out there, and we have kind of forgotten about it, Israel did hit a new strike of a weaponization place in Iran, is there's 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium in a tunnel in Isfahan. Are we going to secure that? And that gets to that we may need some boots on the ground to do that, which gets to the Strait of Hormuz and Karg Island refineries. That means American boots on the ground. Is the president going to go there or not? Or is he going to take that exit ramp? Remember, American interests and Israeli interests are different. Israeli interests really do want regime change, and that is a long-term prospect. And my article coming out in the Jerusalem Post is basically, is Israel and America, but especially America, ready for this war of attrition that's going to go on for a long period of time. But opening up the Straits of Hormuz is going to be incredibly important. My country has said it is too dangerous at this point to escort tankers going through the Straits of Hormuz, which is concerning, which means you have to degrade the drone factory, the drone bases and whatever's left that can confront the fast boats, that can confront the tankers that are there. So there's going to have to be a major change here. Now, why the world is not getting on board here, I don't know, but we really need to twist arms here. And we also need to stop the Iranians who are shipping more oil today than they did before the war started. Why we haven't stopped that? Because that is helping at discounted rates our primary adversary, China. And it's also keeping the financial lifeline going to Iran. So there is many moving parts here, but I think the timeline, America and the West has a different timeline than Iran, but Israel lives in the Middle East, and Israel knows that timeline. And hopefully President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu could still be on the same page here, because this is going to take a much longer period of time, but that goes against what's going on in a divided America.
Absolutely. Brigadier General Harel Knafo and Dr. Eric Mandel, thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
And speaking of the Strait of Hormuz, tensions continue. Iran is now warning that ships must seek its permission before passing through the strait, a threat that could further escalate the global energy crisis. The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy, Alireza Tangsiri, said vessels that ignore Iranian warnings risk running into trouble in the strategic waterway. He cited ships that attempted transit this week and were targeted by Iranian forces. And Iranian officials also warned that if Iran's ports are targeted, ports and docks across the region could become legitimate military targets. Now, the United States military has been removing naval mines in the strait, but it's not escorted commercial shipping. About a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas normally pass through the strait. Now, the U.S. says it's destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels so far, while President Trump has demanded Tehran remove the mines or face the consequences. And so joining us now with more on the tensions surrounding the Strait of Hormuz is Gina Cohen, a gas analyst specializing in the Eastern Mediterranean. Gina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the Strait of Hormuz making major headlines this week. It's a major shipping lane. What can you tell us about the impact of this war and its closure on gas, oil, and the sort of the global energy market?
Well, I think that nobody anticipated that the strait was going to be closed. And therefore, I think that nobody really knows what is going to happen. What is happening now is that no oil, except indeed, as the last speaker said, Iranian oil, is going through the strait. No oil is going through because it is too risky for the ships and for the crews, and because the insurance is either so terribly expensive or non-existent, and because despite the fact that President Trump said that he would issue a total of $20 billion of insurance and would escort the ships, it is not sufficient, because insurance is good from the economic point of view, but escorting the ships is not happening yet, or not happening yet well enough. And therefore the crews and the owners are not going through the strait. And this means a loss of, depending if you look at it gross or net, but a loss of 20 million barrels of oil a day going through the strait. That is the gross volume. The net volume is less, it's 12 to 13. Because Saudi Arabia especially, and the Emirates secondly, are able to send some of the oil via pipeline westwards, from east to west, and they can send, the Saudis can send about 5 million barrels, the Emirates can send about 1 million barrel to the west. In terms of LNG, liquefied natural gas, Qatar is the second biggest LNG supplier in the world. They have called force majeure. It means they are not shipping and they're not producing and they're not exporting any LNG. This has very strong consequences for the East. Europe has only been buying about 8% of its LNG from Qatar, but the East, India, China, Asia has been buying a lot of its LNG from Qatar.
And that's interesting because this also negatively affects Iran's allies, Russia, China, this closure of the strait. So what's in it for Iran to shut down this strait, especially if it's negatively affecting its own allies?
Well, it affects China a lot, and China's had discussions with Iran to continue to receive the cheaper oil that Iran sells than Brent. And as I said, Iran is still exporting some oil. China is in quite a good position for three reasons, because it is still getting some oil, because it has about 1.4 billion barrels of oil in reserve, and because its economy is a bit slow, so it's consuming less, and the weather is an element. The weather is an element for China, for Europe, so the whole world is consuming a bit less. Russia is not necessarily suffering because higher oil prices enable Russia to sell its oil at a more expensive price. And in addition, Russian oil and Russian ships were under sanctions, and President Trump has decided to lift some of these sanctions. Inter alia has allowed India to continue to start buying again oil from Russia. So Russia is suffering less for now. China is suffering more, but is managing in the meantime. The whole issue that is happening is if it's going to be a short term or long term. Short term, the world can manage.
Yeah.
Short term, the world can manage because there's oil in storage, there's some gas in storage. It's shoulder season, so the weather is amenable. And not the price of oil is today about $100. Long term is a whole other ball game. Long term, people and countries will suffer from shortage and prices will go up. Once prices go up extremely, then consumption will go down, economies will suffer. Just as one example, in September 2022, at the height of the Russian-Ukraine war, Germany had to give $200 billion of subsidies, of energy subsidies. So matters can get very bad very fast. For now, it is still manageable.
And we do know that the International Energy Agency says that all 32 member states have agreed to release 400 million barrels from their emergency stockpiles. You mentioned, short term, we can survive this. Long term, it will have major repercussions globally. What is this 400 million barrels? How much time is that going to buy the global economy?
Well, 400 million barrels is about a third or a quarter of what there is in storage. It's good news and bad news. It's good news because, yes, barrels are being released, but it's bad news because it's some kind of admittance to an emergency situation, to being desperate. These barrels have only been released 5 times in the past, in the 1990s and the 2000s and the 2010s, and twice in 2022 with the Ukraine-Russian war. Why is it also bad news? Because as I said before, about 12 or 13 million barrels a day are being cut from the supply, which is the gap between what can be supplied via the Hormuz and what can be supplied from west to east in the pipelines going to the Red Sea. So this is a 13 million barrels of oil a day in shortage, and the 400 million barrels a day in storage can only be released at a rate of 2 million barrels a day. So it's going to take 200 days to make up the shortage. Another issue is that you don't press a button and put the switch on and the light comes on. It takes 2 or 3 days for the brain to go to the hand, for the Ministry of Energy to give the orders. It takes another 10 days to get the oil out into the ships for the buyers. So it can take 2 or 3 weeks. So it's good news, but it's more of a acamol than a long-time cure.
Like a Band-Aid, absolutely.
Band-Aid.
Gina Cohen, we're going to be keeping our eye on the Strait of Hormuz. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your unique analysis.
Thank you for having me.
And now, back. So in response to the overnight barrage from Hezbollah, the Israeli military resumed intensive and ongoing airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Beirut's southern suburbs, including the group's stronghold in the Dakheh. The IDF continues to strike Hezbollah terror infrastructure in Beirut with intense waves of attacks from the air and the sea. Among some of the targets struck, terror infrastructure, weapons shortage sites, Central Command headquarters, and the Air Force headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Beirut. So far, about 70 terror targets have been struck in the Beirut area, including approximately 50 high-rise buildings used by Hezbollah for terror activities, and several key operatives were also eliminated. Now, Hezbollah has placed its terror infrastructure in the heart of Beirut under the cover of the civilian population, much as Hamas has done in Gaza. And over the past week, the IDF ordered the evacuation of residents from most of the Dakheh district in order to protect their safety. So joining us now with more on the escalation with Lebanon is Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, Special Analyst for the Middle East at JCFA and a former Chief Analyst of Israeli Military Intelligence. Jacques, thank you for joining us. Now, we saw an unprecedented coordinated attack from Iran and its terror proxy Hezbollah last night. Is Israel heading for a full-out war with Hezbollah, a ground invasion into Lebanon?
A full war, yes. Ground invasion. This I'm a little bit skeptical about it, because I don't think that there's a need for that. And if there is, I think that we should be happy if we stop at the third row of the Lebanese villages in South Lebanon, meaning that it's more or less around the Litani River. So this is not going to be a campaign where we reach Beirut or we just cut the access Beirut Damascus. This is not going to be the same. And I think that first, before reaching that, I think that we have to employ a much more powerful attacks from the Air Force. But right now, this is limited because of the fact that most of the Air Force effort is directed against Iran. So in the meantime, I mean, what the IDF is doing is just destroying some of the infrastructure of Hezbollah and trying to chase and as much as possible of their missiles and their launchers in the Bekaa Valley, in northern Lebanon, and in South Lebanon also. And I think that there's no other choice right now but to confront Hezbollah.
Now, Hezbollah's capabilities, I mean, were largely diminished after October 7th, and we saw, of course, you know, the famous beeper, pager operation. But it's clear that they have spent the duration of the ceasefire to rebuild and to rearm. So what is your assessment of their capabilities as it stands today?
As you said, they have received a very severe blow in the campaign of 2024. But basically, I mean, from that time till today, 16 months, Hezbollah has succeeded in recovering, in reconstructing its power, its units, and appointing new commanders for the units that were killed, that decapitated most of them. And under the sponsorship and the control of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Hezbollah has turned into a unit of the Iranian army. So this is what we are facing today. We are facing an organization that speaks Lebanese, but in fact is directed and a mercenary of Iran, and it's part of the Iranian front. As such, we have to see it as an integral part of the Iranian front in front of us.
And can you also give a breakdown of the situation inside of Lebanon? Because the Lebanese government has issued sort of an unprecedented rebuke of the terror group. Where does this stand now?
Well, you know, if you have to believe what the Lebanese government has to say and is saying, I think that we would be lost. We would be lost because, I mean, there's no hope from this government unless it decides definitely to follow the American Council saying that they have to outlaw the Hezbollah. If they don't outlaw Hezbollah, I mean, then nothing will happen. They have promised in 2025, beginning 2025, that the whole south of Lebanon would be demilitarized and would be empty of Hezbollah presence. Well, you know, the chief of the army has solemnly lied both to the government, to the Americans, to the French, to everybody. Because, I mean, as we see it today, Hezbollah is still very much present in the south. Very much, I mean, its fire is directed from from parts of the south as much as in the Bekaa Valley and otherwise. I remind you the famous meeting between Rudolf Heikel, the army chief, in Washington with Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham asked him if Lebanon would see Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, and the answer of the Lebanese commander of the army was not in the context of Lebanon, which means that, I mean, Hezbollah is not seen as a terrorist organization, because if they had considered Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, they would have to arrest two ministers that are part of the Lebanese government. They would have to arrest 13 members of parliament, and they would have to destroy all the infrastructure that Hezbollah has built over the years. So, I mean, the divorce between the Lebanese government and Hezbollah is very difficult. It is so difficult that, I mean, the Lebanese have recognized and said that they have no power to do so. during the last meeting at of the government, when the decision was made about stopping all illegal activities of Hezbollah, not the Hezbollah itself, but illegal activities and military activities of Hezbollah, the chief of the army, Rodolphe Haikal, said very plainly and openly to the prime minister, "I'm not going to do it. I cannot do it, and I will not do it." And as follows. There were information that leaked from Lebanon that the Americans, because of this declaration.
Yeah, we have. I don't know if our viewers can hear the sound, but we are just getting a warning that in the next few minutes we're going to have to go into bomb shelters. Yeah.
I'll just finish my sentence that the Americans asked for the resignation of the chief of the army, and they said that there will be no other contacts between the Lebanese army and Washington until this has happened. And following the declaration of the president that he's open to open negotiation with Israel, they said before opening direct negotiation with Israel, you have to make a decision concerning outlawing Hezbollah, and this is not going to happen.
Absolutely. So essentially, I think at the end of the day, what you're saying is Israel is going to have to go in and finish the job itself, something that I think you and many in the security establishment have been saying from day one.
For a long time. I mean, and we have been lured by politicians and by people who said that Hezbollah was deterred, Hezbollah was in fact degraded, and etc. etc. He has lost his power, and we see that this is not exactly what happened on the ground.
All right, Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, I'm going to let you go so that you can make it in time into the shelter. Thank you so much for joining us and for your analysis.
Thank you.
And we're going to continue with the broadcast. We have just under 2 minutes. And so I do want to just get into our final story about Spain, which has officially withdrawn its ambassador, not from the Islamic Republic of Iran, but from Israel, deepening a growing diplomatic rift between Madrid and Jerusalem. The ambassador had already been recalled from Tel Aviv last September for consultations after Israel accused Spain of anti-Semitism over policies related to the war in Gaza. She never returned to her post, and the Spanish government announced that Ambassador Ana Maria Salomon Perez has been formally dismissed from her post following a decree approved by the Council of Ministers and signed by King Felipe VI and Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez. Despite the row, Spain says its embassy in Israel will remain open to help evacuate citizens from the region as the conflict continues. Now, Spain has been harshly critical of Israel since the start of the war in Gaza, and the diplomatic break comes amid tensions between Spain and the United States over the war with Iran. And that is all the time we have at this hour. We will continue to update you here every hour on the hour live on ILTV. I'm Lidar Lazi. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lidar Gavelazi, and coming up in today's newscast. Day 12 of Operation Roaring Lion, the IDF is targeting missile launchers and internal suppression forces, while the U.S. protects the key Strait of Hormuz. And not just Iran, the IDF continues airstrikes against Iranian proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon. And meanwhile, in Israel, sirens send residents in central and northern Israel to shelters multiple times overnight. Day day 12 of the war with Iran. Devastating waves of IDF airstrikes into Iran are ongoing. The IDF says it has degraded or destroyed many of the key assets of Iran's besieged militia in one of the country's western provinces, dealing another blow to the regime's internal security apparatus used to enforce, control, and suppress dissent. At the same time, the Air Force is striking launchers that target Israel. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the latest.
Targets included the main internal security headquarters, a central intelligence command center, IRGC facilities responsible for cracking down on protests, and several besieged command posts. Officials say the strikes are part of a broader effort to weaken the core power structures of the Iranian regime. Earlier, the IDF eliminated a launch squad minutes before they could fire drones from western Iran toward Israel. The Air Force spotted the soldiers at a western Iran launch site and struck them as they entered, halting the attack. The IDF says operations will continue to destroy infrastructure and neutralize drone and missile threats to protect Israel. Meanwhile, new satellite images show extensive damage at Iranian ballistic missile production sites following Israeli airstrikes last week. One image taken by the defense intelligence firm Vantar shows multiple buildings destroyed or badly damaged at Iran's Parchin military complex south of Tehran. The IDF said it struck Parchin on Thursday, targeting factories for the production of explosives for ballistic missile warheads and a facility for mixing and casting missile engines, as well as a complex used for research, development, assembly, and production of advanced cruise missiles. Now on day 12, as long as the last major conflict with Iran, the IDF says it will keep targeting any launchers and military sites aimed at Israel, sending a clear message that the campaign will continue until the U.S. and Israel decide that the threats are neutralized.
And Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes in southern Beirut as the IDF continues to target Hezbollah. Over the last day, Hezbollah expanded its range, including launches directed toward the Tel Aviv area. Lebanon's president has denounced Hezbollah and called for direct talks with Israel to secure a ceasefire. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Israeli forces struck multiple targets in the southern suburbs of Beirut known as Dahia, a well-known Hezbollah stronghold. The military says the airstrikes hit terror infrastructure, including financial facilities, weapon stockpiles, and propaganda material. On the ground, Israeli troops from several divisions continue operations in southern Lebanon to disrupt Hezbollah's military networks. A Hezbollah cell was identified and eliminated in a targeted airstrike, and additional suspects approaching IDF troops were also struck from the air. Troops from the 36th Division also carried out raids, killing militants near Israeli forces. In a precise nighttime strike, the IDF confirmed the killing of a Hezbollah regional commander from the group's Nasser unit. Since the start of Operation Roaring Lion, the military says more than 70 Hezbollah missile launchers have been destroyed, many just minutes before they could be fired toward Israel. Amid the fighting, Lebanon's president Joseph Aoun has called for direct talks with Israel under international supervision, aimed at securing a ceasefire and preventing a wider war. He accused Hezbollah of dragging Lebanon toward disaster, warning the country could become a second Gaza if the fighting continues. Any plan proposed by Aoun would include a ceasefire, deployment of the Lebanese army near the Israeli border, and measures to curb Hezbollah's military activity. If Israel agrees to talks, it would be a significant shift, given the countries remain technically at war and have historically relied on US or UN mediation. Israel has yet to indicate how it will respond to the Lebanese call for talks. For now, Israel and Hezbollah are each causing the other as much damage as they are able. By all accounts, Israel is winning.
Last night and again this afternoon, northern and central Israel came under missile barrages from Iran. New figures are now emerging about the scale of the attacks. According to reports, Iran has launched a total of around 300 missiles at Israel since the start of the war. Joining us now with more is our correspondent India Naftali, who is at the Magen David Adom Command Center in central Israel. India, what can you tell us about the latest attacks?
Oh, last night, Israel had a restless night with a barrage of missiles coming from Iran towards northern and central Israel. However, I can report that there were no direct hits and there were no injuries reported from that missile barrage. However, there were some injuries reported from people rushing to shelters, which is actually quite a problem in the country because not everyone has bomb shelters. Only homes built after 1991 were under this regulation to have shelters. So it is a problem during this war. Now, after last night's barrage, there was a 9-hour lull where there were no attacks, no rockets, no missiles. And then again, about 2 hours ago, another barrage came. The IDF hasn't released details about that barrage. It's something they usually do not do for security reasons. They do not release too much information about barrages when they do happen. Now, Lidar, we do know, like you said, that 300 missiles have been launched towards Israel since the start of the war. About half of those actually are cluster bomb missiles, which are particularly problematic. For one, they're extremely difficult to intercept, but there's actually another reason why they're so problematic. Many of those bomblets, those sub-munitions that are released from the bomb, they don't explode and they can land on streets and cities. And unfortunately, if they're not cleaned up, someone could pick it up or a car could run over it and cause an explosion. So that's why they have to release bomb squads to clean up these bomblets after they've been released.
And India, I do want to ask. Yeah, I do want to ask a little bit about the future of these barrages. I mean, because we're seeing some patterns emerge. Are the attacks starting to slow down?
So what the IDF has noticed is that Iran seems to be struggling to launch coordinated large barrages. We're seeing now smaller numbers of missiles per barrage. But as of now, we're not sure how many missiles Iran has in its arsenal right now. We know at the beginning of the war, they had about 2,500 missiles. They've launched 300 to Israel. And the IDF has said that they've either disabled or destroyed 300 more of those.
So still a lot of work to be done in Iran. India Naftali, thank you so much for joining us and for the updates. And a cargo vessel was hit by an unknown projectile in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Earlier, the United States destroyed Iranian mine-laying vessels near the strait as the U.S. struggles to keep the vital waterway open. ILTV's Kalev Ben-David has the latest developments.
As Iran continues its naval attacks in the Gulf, a cargo ship was struck near the Strait of Hormuz, north of Oman. The strike caused a fire on board. Authorities secured the area and removed the crew. This was the second reported attack on a cargo ship in the strait within hours. Officials have not confirmed who fired the projectile, but the attack came amid Iranian threats to keep the waterway closed as a war tactic to raise economic pressures on the region. Earlier, U.S. Central Command released video it says shows strikes on Iranian boats used to lay naval mines. According to the Pentagon, 16 such vessels were eliminated in operations near the strategic waterway. President Trump warned that if Iran has placed any mines in the strait, they must be removed immediately or Tehran will face military consequences.
The president and his energy team are closely watching the markets, speaking with industry leaders, and the U.S. military is drawing up additional options following the president's directive to continue keeping the Strait of Hormuz open.
The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important energy routes. With about a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments passing through the narrow channel between Iran and Oman. Since the start of the war, shipping through the strait has been severely disrupted. The vital oil transit route has been all but shut since vessels in the area were hit by Iranian strikes following U.S. and Israeli attacks on the Islamic Republic. The closure has been driving oil prices sharply higher and is putting new pressure on the world economy. Iranian Security Chief Ali Larijani warned in a post on X, the Strait of Hormuz will either be a strait of peace and prosperity for all or a strait of defeat and suffering for warmongers.
And joining us now with the latest on the war with Iran is Michael Pregent, senior Middle East analyst, former U.S. military intelligence officer, and former advisor to CENTCOM commanders. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good morning from D.C.
So we're nearly 2 weeks into this war, and the United States and Israel have hit numerous targets, numerous senior Iranian officials. U.S. President Donald Trump has said, on the one hand, that the U.S. operation is far ahead of schedule, and he foresees an end to the war very soon. But on the other hand, here in Israel, the assessment is that there's much more work still to be done. I mean, do you share President Trump's assessment? What do you make of this dissonance?
I think what the president is trying to say that we are hitting our military objectives, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, the drone factories. We are succeeding from a military standpoint, but we're trying to create a window, an opportunity for the Iranian people to take back their government. And if the people don't move against the regime, at least show some sort of signs that they're going to do that, then the president can basically say that we've accomplished our military mission to degrade Iran's capabilities to threaten its neighbors, to build a nuclear weapon, to export terrorism, and to fund terrorism, and call it a successful, limited military campaign. Regime change has to have the face of the Iranian people on it. It can't be something we force them into.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a key strategic shipping strait. There's now an ongoing battle for controlling this as the Iranians are threatening essentially all the ships passing by. I mean, what can you tell us about this, and how will it affect sort of the continuing operations in the war moving forward?
Well, that's a new phase of this operation. So you're getting away from going after military targets on the ground in Iran and now having to defend international commerce shipping lane. And it's very difficult to do, but we can do it. The U.S. Navy can do it. We have those capabilities. The one thing that everybody's worried about are mines. But see, these mines can't be set to target a specific ship. They're indiscriminate. So if they go out there, that would put Chinese tankers at risk. It would put Russian tankers at risk. So there's a calculation that the regime has to make. Do we just send these mines out there where they can just blow up anything? Or do we threaten to do it and see what kind of concessions we can get? So that's what I think we're seeing right now. The Shahed drones cannot sink oil tankers. So if an oil tanker is actually struck and it sinks, it's going to be a different type of munition. A anti-ship missile maybe, or something with a higher payload. But the Shahed 136 drones cannot sink big ships.
And you mentioned as well earlier about regime change. Now, both the United States and Israel have sent mixed signals about regime change as sort of an aim of this war. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directly addressed the Iranian people, saying soon their time will come to sort of rise up, topple this regime. But from a strategic or, a military aspect, I mean, how likely is it that this war will in fact succeed in bringing down the regime, or really succeed in setting the stage for the Iranian people to rise up?
Well, we've decimated leadership, right? We've basically hit leaders going down to maybe the seventh, level of capable leaders. So that's the IRGC. And when it comes to the Assembly of Experts or the Guardian Council, we've decimated that, and we don't know whether Khomeini's son is alive. We know he's been severely injured, but this is the perfect candidate for the IRGC. They want somebody like him because he basically deferred to them on everything. And if he's laid up in a bed and can't actually communicate and doesn't know what's going on, that's the perfect supreme leader for the IRGC to continue these missions. Earlier in your report, you said a besieged headquarters was hit in the West. That's huge. It's the besieged that puts down the population when it rises up or when it protests. Besieged targets need to be center for any campaign, whether it's Israeli Air Force or U.S. Air Force. We see videos of besieged members saying there's nobody showing up, the regime is not in charge anymore, and I'm going to go home, meaning I'm a besieged member and I'm going to go home. So you're looking for things like that. We have to see signs on the ground in order to provide momentum, but we can't create that momentum. It needs to be, we degrade the regime, if you think it's weak enough, do something about it. And that's what I think everyone's looking for, the Iranian people to do something about it.
Now, we see that Israel is mainly focusing on the missile capabilities, which, of course, directly threaten the country, all the Middle Eastern countries, and, of course, the internal security apparatus. But I do want to ask about the nuclear program. What is the status of that today and of the enriched uranium that is supposedly, held or trapped underground?
Right. So that's one of the key things. When I was a former intelligence officer, when I came out of the intelligence community, I started working on the Iran deal portfolio. And I looked at the nuclear program and I looked at Annex B, which basically was all the concessions that the Obama administration was willing to give to Tehran. But one of the things I noticed was, disclosed sites and undisclosed sites. So if you say that the JCPOA only covered, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action only covered disclosed sites, that automatically means there are undisclosed sites. So that's what's being targeted by the IDF, by the Americans. We basically set their nuclear program back probably a decade, right? But it doesn't mean they can't reconstitute it faster if we don't pay attention to it, meaning they will prioritize putting air defense assets where these nuclear sites are, rebuilding them. And when we see those indicators, we have to hit them. We have to strike them. But the one good thing is Iran's now learning that Russian and Chinese air defense systems are no match for the U.S. Air Force or the Israeli Air Force. And that is something that I've heard in the Middle East. We buy 3 air defense systems so that we can make one work. We cannibalize the other 2 to make one work. That's how bad these systems are. And I think Iran knows it better than any country at this point.
Absolutely. Well, still more work to be done, of course. Michael Pregent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Meanwhile, Gaza has been relatively quiet since the start of the war with Iran. Earlier today, the IDF struck a rocket launch site in the Saba area of northern Gaza. The site used by Hamas to fire rockets towards Israel was targeted because it violated the current ceasefire agreement. This comes against the backdrop of a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Israel says it will respond to any attempts to resume hostilities. This after Hamas made several recent attempts to fire rockets from the Strip, which the IDF says constitute a breach of the truce. The IDF says forces under Southern Command remain deployed in the area and will continue operations to prevent rearmament by terrorist groups, neutralize threats, and protect the state of Israel and its citizens from any further attacks from Gaza or elsewhere. And the government is preparing a major expansion of the national budget to finance the war effort. According to reports, the cabinet plans to increase spending by about 40 billion shekels, around $13 billion, mostly for defense operations and other wartime needs. Defense spending is expected to jump sharply, driven by the cost of airstrikes, reservist mobilization, and missile defense. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich says the war has already cost Israel about 9 billion shekels, and the fiscal deficit is expected to grow. The finance ministry also estimates the economic shutdown during the conflict has been costing the economy about 9.5 billion shekels per week. The war is also reshaping political priorities with controversial legislation, including parts of the Haredi draft exemption law reportedly put on hold as the government focuses on passing a wartime budget.
לכן בכלל לא הייתה שאלה. היינו חייבים לצאת למערכה הזאת, ואנחנו פועלים ביתר שאת עם החיילים והטייסים הגיבורים שלנו. אבל, יש כאן אבל אחד גדול, זה עולה כסף, הרבה כסף. ולכן אנחנו נדרשים לתת תקציב מיוחד במהלך המלחמה עם עשרות מיליארדי שקלים כדי לעזור לתקציב הביטחון למאמץ המלחמתי.
And as Israelis continue living with missile sirens during the ongoing war with Iran, many children are still coping with the trauma of October 7th and years of terror attacks. For more than 2 decades, the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund has been providing specialized therapy and support to help young victims heal. Joining us now is Chava Kleiman, Vice President of the organization, to share a little bit more. Chava, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first of us, can you tell us how the Children's Fund was established? I mean, what led to the creation of this organization?
Sure. So about over 2 decades ago, the founder and president, David Rubin, was driving from Jerusalem to his home in Shiloh and was ambushed by terrorists on the road. and he and his 3-year-old son were shot. He was shot in the leg, and his 3-year-old son was shot in the head. And miraculously, they survived the attack, and they're okay today. But the trauma that he saw on his son and the other children around him made him decide that we needed to do something to help the children in Israel.
And, you know, since the October 7th attacks, and now, of course, with the ongoing war with Iran and the missile sirens and, you know, sounding really throughout the day and throughout the night, how has the level of trauma amongst Israeli children, you know, how has that changed?
So we've seen an incredible increase in trauma amongst children all over Israel, because this is not something that's only affecting children in a certain place, but all over the country. And we see children that don't even have time to try to heal from the trauma, because what's happening now is that it's continuous trauma. And one of the things we know about trauma is that, you know, we try to heal trauma when there's a break in trauma, but that's not happening. So it's a completely different scene that we're seeing in children all over the country.
And can you maybe talk about some of the main projects or the therapeutic treatments that the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund provides, sort of to help children cope with these, you know, trauma, with these changes, and help sort of rebuild their sense of safety?
So because we're working with children, we need to work in very creative ways, right? You can't just sit down with a child and say, what's wrong? So we work with a number of trained therapists in very different creative therapies: music, drama, arts, small animal therapy, horseback riding therapy. So we do a lot of that kind of work. We also do group work with children in schools or in different centers or after-school activities. We try to get to whoever we can, and especially now, we have mobile therapy teams that are going out to people who can't make it to centers, whether it's evacuated families in the hotels or people who just can't leave their homes for whatever reason. So we work in those kind of ways, and also a lot of resilience programming, because also that's very important at this time.
And can you tell us a little bit about the resilience programming?
Sure. So, you know, something I always like to say is that, yes, Israelis are resilient and children are resilient, but if we don't give them the tools to help them and the support that they need, you know, they're human beings in the end. So we do a lot of, like I said, you know, group work or individual therapy, but also family therapy, and also support for parents, because when you're working with children, you also need to help their parents.
Absolutely. And, you know, you spent many years working in other community roles before joining the organization. What led you to personally take on this mission?
I think over years of really working with families and children and dealing with trauma, I realized that if we don't help the future generation in not only emergency crisis healing, but long-term healing, resilience care, what is the future of our generation going to look like? What are our children going to look like? And that really just made me want to get involved and keep doing the important work that we're doing.
Well, it really is crucial and important work, especially during these times. Chava Kleinman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so to help our children overcome the trauma of war, you can scan the QR code on your screens or visit israelchildren.org now. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 10 degrees Celsius or 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's at ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladarga Velazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching. So that was great. At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with the welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kol El Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kol El Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help, and you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kol El Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time. The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national land and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth. Another week in the bomb shelter here in Israel as the war to take down the Islamic regime wages on. But is it enough? The American and Israeli military campaign is seeing stunning success, but it's not over yet, and there are key mistakes that can sabotage the whole operation. And now I'm going to explain what not to do to ruin this opportunity from the perspective of the West. As I mentioned, the military campaign so far has focused on eliminating key leadership, targeting IRGC bases, sabotaging the nuclear program, and more recently, targeting the IRGC's energy assets. Now, Israeli and American strikes have targeted command infrastructure and air defenses, as well as drone facilities, weapons depots, and key military complexes tied to the regime's regional operations, with over 3,000 sites already hit, according to CENTCOM, and over 7,000 IRGC and Iranian military casualties so far. But the campaign is now entering a second phase, with both countries stating it will last between 1 to 2 weeks for this phase. The focus now is shifting towards dismantling two pillars of the regime's power. First, the ballistic missile program, and second, the internal repression machinery that's run by the IRGC. Now, this matters because for decades, the Islamic Republic invested enormous resources into building the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. These missiles were never meant to be purely defensive weapons. They were designed to threaten Israel, to threaten American forces across the region, and eventually to extend that threat even further into Europe and even the U.S. mainland through the development of ICBMs. But not so fast, mullahs. The facilities tied to that program are now being systematically targeted. Now, that includes major military complexes like Parchin, where it's long been associated with missile development and military research as well. At the same time, the campaigns also honing in on the regime's tools of internal repression. The IRGC isn't just a military force. It operates intelligence networks and paramilitary units, as well as surveillance systems that exist primarily to control the Iranian population. Now, these are the same structures that beat protesters in the streets, that arrest journalists and enforce the regime's social restrictions on women. Dismantling those institutions is critical. It's essential if the Iranian people are ever going to have the opportunity to determine their own future. But even when the military strategy is working, the political strategy can still go terribly wrong. And this week we saw 3 warning signs that show exactly how the West could still screw this up. The first issue is territorial integrity. Now, over the past few days, rumors have been circulating, suggesting that Kurdish forces from Iraq might attempt to enter western Iran, or that foreign powers might even encourage these separatist movements inside the country during the war. Let me be very, very clear about something. Dividing the territory of Iran is absolutely unacceptable to almost all Iranians. Even Iranians who despise the Islamic Republic overwhelmingly support territorial integrity of their country. This is not a regime position, it's a national identity position, which is why the regime has used this myth of Israel wanting to divide Iran for years to drum up fear amongst the people. If the West were perceived as trying to break Iran apart territorially, it would immediately unite many Iranians against both the United States and the State of Israel. Israelis and the Jewish community, just to understand how sensitive this issue is for Iranians, imagine for a second that someone was proposing Israel should give away Jerusalem as part of a political solution. That's how explosive the idea of partitioning Iran is for most Iranians. It's simply not negotiable. And that's why it's so important to hear Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu clearly say this week that Israel does not seek to divide Iran.
כי איננו מבקשים לחלק את איראן. אנחנו מבקשים לשחרר את איראן. לשחרר אותה מעול העריצות ולחיות עמה בשלום.
Now, that clarity matters. However, Israel does maintain strategic relationships with Kurdish groups in places like Iraq and Syria. Those relationships developed because Kurdish forces there have often been important partners against Islamist threats in those specific countries. But that is a far, far cry from supporting separatism inside Iran itself. Those are 2 completely different situations. Now, after the initial rumors broke, President Trump also addressed this issue and made it clear he had warned the Kurdish forces in Iraq not to enter the conflict, recognizing that such a move could destabilize the situation even further.
We're not looking to the Kurds going in. We're very friendly with the Kurds, as you know, but we don't want to make the war any more complex than it already is. No.
You've ruled that out?
We don't want, I have ruled it out. I don't want the Kurds going in.
The West needs to remember that if the goal here is to support the Iranian people against this regime and enable them to reclaim their country, the West can't be trying to dismantle the Iranian nation itself, nor even appear as if they're trying to either. Now, the second mistake the West must avoid right now is empowering or even amplifying these fake opposition groups. Now, for decades, Western governments and media outlets have repeatedly misidentified who actually represents the Iranian people, from regime lobbyists to the most notorious example, the Mujahideen, or MEK, which I exposed for what they really are just a few weeks ago on this show. Now, this group began as a strange mix of Marxist and Islamist ideology and was even listed as a foreign terror organization by the United States. They played a key role in the early revolutionary coalition that ultimately helped Ayatollah Khomeini come to power in 1979. before later falling out with the regime. Now, today, the organization attempts to portray itself as a democratic alternative to the Islamic Republic, particularly through their front organization or organizations. In the U.S., it's NCRI, National Council of Resistance of Iran. But their ideology is anything but democratic. Inside Iran, the group has almost no legitimacy whatsoever and is despised by the public, in part because of its alliance with Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War. Despite this, the MEK has spent years cultivating Western politicians and lobbying networks. Their leader, Maryam Rajavi, frequently appears at conferences that are attended by former Western officials who love to portray the group as a viable future leadership for Iran. Except it's not. MEK even had the audacity this week to declare an imaginary government in exile. Government of whom? Because the Iranian people aren't with you, MEK. That's for sure. These groups claim to speak for Iranians while actively trying to divide the country and silence voices of actual Iranians inside of it. And unfortunately, some Western media outlets continue to amplify these fringe groups as if they have any real legitimacy. This week, the Financial Times ran a profile of MEK, and OAN also featured interviews with the group, presenting them, falsely, as the Iranian opposition. They are not. This is a problem that the West keeps repeating. The loudest voices in exile politics are often mistaken for the voices of the Iranian people themselves. Which brings us to the third mistake that the West absolutely must avoid: the so-called reformist solution. For years, Western governments convinced themselves that the Islamic Republic contained moderates who could gradually reform the system from within. But the truth is that the regime itself engineered this reformist narrative. The reformist label functions as a diplomatic tool. It allows the regime to present a softer face to Western audiences while at the same time maintaining an authoritarian structure that continues to operate inside Iran. We've seen this cycle many times before. Figures like Hassan Rouhani, Javad Zarif, and even the current president of the regime, Masoud Pezeshkian, are all marketed internationally as moderates. Western governments embrace them as evidence that the regime might in fact evolve. Yet throughout those years, the supreme leader retained ultimate authority over everything. The IRGC expanded its economic and military power, and repression inside Iran continued. And when you look at the record of many of these so-called reformists, the contradictions become obvious. Take Masoud Pezeshkian. In Western interviews, he's presented himself as someone who supports relaxing the mandatory hijab laws and even easing some social restrictions. But when he actually held authority inside the Iranian system, he enforced those exact same restrictions. During his time overseeing parts of the country's medical system, he himself imposed strict hijab requirements in hospitals and in medical institutions even before those policies were formally codified into law. In other words, when he had power, he did exactly what the regime hardliners would have done. He enforced the policies that he later claimed should be reformed. And this week provided another example. Pezeshkian publicly stated that the regime would stop firing missiles at Arab states in the region, and even apologized. But only hours later, Iranian forces launched missiles again towards Arab states, including attacks directed at Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. That contradiction should tell you everything that you need to know about this reformist narrative. One set of statements for Western audiences, and another set of actions on the ground. Reformists function as a communications layer for the regime. They provide the talking points that Western politicians and journalists can point to as evidence that the Islamic Republic might someday change or be negotiating partners. But the core power structure of the regime remains untouched: the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which is the overarching concept of the Islamic regime itself, that all power rests in the hands of the supreme religious leader, who just this week has been named as Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba. As long as the same system of repression continues inside the country under this structure, there will be no change in Iran, whether a reformist leads or not. In fact, placing a reformist as a figurehead probably makes it even more likely that the regime will survive. If the goal is to end the regime's ability to terrorize its own population and threaten the entire region, then the focus must remain on dismantling the structures that sustain the regime itself, particularly the IRGC, and of course, the broader security state. Ultimately, the future of Iran can only be decided by the Iranian people, not by President Trump or by anyone else, because one thing is already clear. Ignoring what those people are actually saying or attempting to impose artificial political solutions from outside will only prolong the conflict and increase the risk of internal chaos. The military campaign may be weakening the regime, but the political strategy that follows is what will determine whether that moment is actually going to lead to freedom or whether the West once again repeats the same mistakes it's made in Iran for decades. Now, while the Islamic regime is losing those missile sites and rapidly, as well as their leaders, something else has erupted across many Western cities and in Western media. A wave of manufactured outrage campaigns being branded to the public as anti-war protests. But when you actually look at who's organizing many of these demonstrations, who is funding them, and what message they're pushing, it becomes very clear that this isn't an organic peace movement concerned about the well-being of Iranians or Americans. It's a network of anti-American activist organizations and media figures who are running a parallel information campaign to shield the Islamic regime from any kind of accountability while trying to breed resentment against the United States and Israel. It's the exact same subversion narrative that we've seen promoted after October 7th against Israel, only now they're more explicitly turning it against the Iranian people and the United States itself. In New York City, for example, one of the main organizers of these protests has been the People's Forum. It's a socialist activist group that works closely with a network of organizations, including the Answer Coalition, NIAC, the mouthpiece of the Islamic regime which lobbies in Washington, D.C., Code Pink, and the Palestinian Youth Movement, which has ties to the PFLP, a terror group. Many of these groups have been at the center of most of the largest anti-Israel and anti-American demonstrations in the past few years, and they operate as a paid protest infrastructure that mobilizes demonstrations across multiple cities within hours of a geopolitical event. The concerning part is that many of these organizations are connected through a funding network linked to Neville Roy Singham, a tech billionaire based in Shanghai who has financed a web of radical left-wing media outlets and political organizations promoting anti-Western narratives. Now, Singham funds Code Pink, the Answer Coalition, the People's Forum, and God knows what else. Now, not only does he happen to be married to the co-founder of Code Pink, Jody Evans, but he also funds many media outlets with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. He frequents CCP events in China, and multiple investigations into this network have raised serious questions about how these groups consistently amplify messaging aligned coincidentally with the geopolitical interests of the Chinese government. Must just be a coincidence, right? The hypocrisy of this movement becomes even more obvious when you look at what it's been silent about for many years. The Islamic Republic has been executing political prisoners, imprisoning journalists, and brutally crushing protests for decades. In the 1980s alone, more than 30,000 political prisoners were executed by the regime. In 2022, the IRGC poisoned hundreds of schoolgirls across the country in order to limit protests. And in January, the Islamic regime murdered approximately 36,000 more protesters, including hundreds of children, and many, many more are being tortured in prisons today. Where were the mass demonstrations in New York City demanding justice for those girls? Where were the rallies in London calling for an end to the regime responsible for that terror? But now that regime's military infrastructure is being targeted. Many of the same activists who spent years burning American flags and denouncing the United States as an imperial power and protesting on the streets against Israel have suddenly discovered a passionate concern for the safety of American soldiers. How convenient. What we're also seeing this week is that this same protest movement has a media equivalent because many of the same bogus talking points being shouted in the streets are now being repeated by commentators across both the left and the right. And the result is a remarkable convergence of disinformation and bad faith arguments that are being fed to the American public. It's the horseshoe theory in action. On the left, people like Cenk Uygur responded to the assassination of Khamenei by calling him courageous for standing up to Israel. Courageous? The supreme leader of a theocratic regime that jails women for their clothing and executes protesters is now being described as courageous by a self-described American progressive? How can someone be so obsessed with Jews that their brain is visibly rotting like this? But he isn't alone. His co-host, Temper Tantrum Anna Kasparian, was asked directly on Piers Morgan's program whether she would condemn Khamenei following Cenk's irresponsible comments. Take a look.
He called the Ayatollah courageous because he hadn't gone on his knees to Israel. Did you agree? I mean, do you think the Ayatollah Khamenei was a courageous man?
Well, he never capitulated to the Israelis, and we live under a government where, regardless of which party is in power, is on its knees on behalf of Israel.
So instead of doing so, she literally refused and started blabbering on about Israel and claiming that thousands of protesters being killed by the Islamic Republic is Zionist propaganda. But if you think this kind of commentary is limited to the left, think again. On the right, we have Qatar's darling Tucker Carlson, who spent the whole week pushing the claim that confronting the Islamic regime will somehow lead to thousands of American deaths, and more recently, claiming the bizarre claim that surrender by the Islamic Republic means condoning U.S. military raping Iranian women. Tucker's breakdown, of course, conveniently ignores the fact that this same regime has spent decades funding militias that have already killed American soldiers and have even participated in plots to assassinate American officials for 47 years and counting. But okay. Then there's Dave Smith, who appeared on Piers Morgan's program again and declared that the United States and Israel are the worst terrorist organizations in the world. Take a look.
The IDF is the worst terrorist organization in the region. Let's get real. The United States of America is arguably the worst terrorist organization in the world. If you want to look over the last 25 years, how many innocent civilians we've slaughtered. You're getting us into the neocon. Yeah, that's right. You're getting us into the neocon seventh war, which they've been dying for the last 25 years.
You might want to take down, by the way.
No, actually, if you love this country, if you're a real patriot, you'd have to hate this government.
What's striking about that statement, and really all of Dave's deluded analysis of foreign policy, is that it requires completely erasing the historical record of how nations act. And yes, in this case, the Islamic Republic itself. Decades of missile attacks, proxy warfare, assassination plots, and attacks on American troops disappear from the story in favor of a narrative where the West is always the aggressor and authoritarian regimes are always the victims. Dave's assumptions rest on faulty premises that everyone, if given the chance, will act rationally, or as we perceive to be rational in the Western world. This is the dangerously naive Western mistake that we so frequently see from both the left and right. Dave's libertarian fantasy is rooted in luxury beliefs that don't apply outside of a society with strong institutions and the rule of law. Dave's puny little mind can't fathom that there are, in fact, bad actors in this world motivated by Islamist extremism, and therefore it must be the West's fault that they are the way they are. This is, as history has repeatedly shown, entirely inaccurate. When you step back and look at this entire landscape, the most striking thing is how indistinguishable the talking points have become. The far left and parts of the far right are now repeating nearly identical claims about this war. They focus obsessively on small incidents while ignoring the bigger strategic threat. They fearmonger about hypothetical American casualties, blaming Israel for a fight that's clearly America's, all while ignoring the fact that the regime they are defending has already spent decades exporting violence across the region and beyond. So while these protesters march through Western cities and these commentators argue on television and social media, it is worth remembering that one group of people whose voices are largely missing from these conversations: the Iranian people themselves. because those people have been risking their lives for years to end this regime that these protest movements and commentators now seemed determined to protect. Well, moving on to the good, the bad, and the ugly stories of the week. Before we finish up, we're going to kick it off with the ugly. This week in Australia, we saw young women whose crime was refusing to sing a song for a regime that oppresses them. This week during the Women's Asian Cup in Australia, members of the Iranian women's national football team refused to sing the national anthem of the Islamic Republic before their match. Now, it was a quiet but powerful act of protest, but that was enough to trigger fury from the regime. Iranian state media immediately attacked the players, calling them wartime traitors and accusing them of disloyalty during a time of conflict. Now, commentators who are close to the regime demanded that the players be held accountable when they return home to Iran, and human rights activists and Iranian dissidents quickly warned that the team could face serious consequences and repercussions on an individual level if they're forced back to Iran. So following this debacle, reports also emerged that the players were being closely monitored during their time at the tournament by regime officials traveling with them, and even that their families back in Iran could face pressure or intimidation from authorities, something that the regime has a long history of doing. Meanwhile, Iranians in the diaspora have been raising the alarm about the team's safety and calling on Australia to offer protection to the players if they fear returning home. Now, so far, the Australian government has accepted the defections of 5 of the players, granting them asylum. But the pressure really mounted after President Trump got involved and called on Australia to help them ensure the entire team had the ability to stay. And if not, then the United States would accept them if Australia did not. Now, this development followed the disturbing footage of players saying help in sign language from the bus windows of the team bus. This was prompting protesters at the scene to stop the bus from leaving physically. But Australian authorities intervened and prevented the protesters from blocking the bus, allowing them to go back to their hotel. The tragic reality is if those girls are returned to Iran, they will absolutely face consequences. In fact, some of them are probably too scared to even defect right now due to the pressure on their families. Australia and all the international community cannot allow the Islamic regime to continue this long-standing persecution of its top athletes in this way. And our bad story of the week is something that would be absurd if it wasn't real. While Iranians around the world, even inside Iran, were celebrating the end of one of the most brutal dictators of the last half-century, small groups of activists in some Western cities were doing the exact opposite. They were holding public gatherings to mourn him. In the United Kingdom, a candlelight vigil for Ali Khamenei was held in Manchester, organized around the Islamic Center of Manchester, which is funded by the regime, of course, where around 100 people gathered to commemorate the dead supreme terrorist. Similar tributes were also reported in other parts of the UK, including some of the events connected to different mosques, as well as different student Islamic societies, with some university groups even posting messages calling Khamenei a martyr and urging followers to pray for him. Seriously. And it didn't stop there. In New York City, a small group of regime supporters gathered in Washington Square Park to hold a vigil honoring Khamenei. The gathering included a makeshift memorial with his photos and candles, and at least one speaker who praised his life and urged supporters to emulate him. Some of the participants at this same event even chanted "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." But I guess that's no surprise for that crowd. The good news is that in many of these cases, the events were massively outnumbered by Iranians who showed up to confront them, turning the ugly moment into a reminder that the Islamic Republic's propaganda does not speak for the Iranian people. But the fact that these vigils happened at all tells you something important. The Islamic Republic doesn't just export missiles and militias, it exports propaganda. And speaking of those courageous Iranians who showed up, our good story this week we end with today is exactly that. Because while a small group of regime supporters attempted to hold a mourning event for Ali Khamenei in London, they were quickly met by something they didn't expect. Iranians who were there to celebrate. Video from the scene showed members of the Iranian diaspora arriving at the gathering and completely overtaking it. What was supposed to be a somber memorial for the supreme leader of the Islamic regime quickly turned into something very, very different. Music started playing, people began chanting, some people were dancing in the street, and Iranian flags appeared everywhere, along with a few Israeli flags too. Take a look. So basically what the regime supporters had hoped would be a moment of grief ultimately became a street party. And we saw something really similar this week here in Israel. In the middle of a war with sirens sounding and missiles being fired, Israelis running into bomb shelters during Purim, a celebration. And what did Israelis do? What they do best. They turned the bomb shelter into a rave. People were dancing, singing, celebrating Purim underground while the sirens were still blaring. Check it out. When you put those two moments side by side, Iranians turning a regime memorial into a street party and Israelis turning a bomb shelter and a missile attack into a rave, you start to see something important. These are two societies that refuse to live in fear. The Islamic Republic built its entire system on intimidation, violence, and control. But the more it tries to terrify people, the more people find ways to laugh at it. And in the end, that may be the most powerful form of resistance there is. Well, that's it for this week. Of course, back next week with more stories and updates from across the region and updates about the war against the Islamic Republic. If you have a story, feel free to reach out on social media at Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv on Instagram. Until then, I'll see you next week on Axis of Truth on JNS. Well, as the conflict against the Islamic Republic continues, Israel and the United States remain united on the front lines in this fight for freedom. The Islamic Republic continues to launch those missiles and drones at the Holy Land, and a missile strike in Beit Shemesh killed 9 Israelis and destroyed a synagogue. Another attack in central Israel left 2 more dead. Even hospitals are not immune. A drone struck Galilee Medical Center, one of the hospitals supported by the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Millions of Israelis remain under a national state of emergency, sheltering from the continued attacks. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground right now deploying reinforced mobile bomb shelters, equipping first responders with life-saving gear, supporting hospitals, and providing food to displaced families and elderly. In this critical hour, your support helps protect Israel's most vulnerable and stands firmly for freedom and faith. Stand for Israel, stand for freedom, and give generously today. To rush your gift, call 888-488-IFCJ. 888-488-IFCJ. You can also go online, ifcj.org.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Ladar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the biggest headlines from across the region. It's day 13 of Operation Roaring Lion, the war with Iran, and these are all the latest developments. Overnight, Hezbollah launched more than 100 rockets at northern Israel in a massive barrage in what officials say was a coordinated attack with Iran. Sirens sounded across the north as projectiles struck multiple areas, including a direct hit on a home in the Upper Galilee. 5 people were injured, mostly from shock and flying debris. Emergency crews from Magen David Adom, United Hatzalah, and fire and rescue services were deployed across the region to treat the wounded, extinguish fires, and search for additional damage. The IDF says Hezbollah fired the rockets from southern Lebanon. The same time, Iranian projectiles triggered sirens in parts of central Israel and Judea and Samaria. Israeli officials say the military is now preparing for a possible expansion of attacks by both Hezbollah and Iran as tensions continue to escalate on multiple fronts. And in response, the Israeli military resumed intensive and ongoing airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Beirut's southern suburbs, including the group's stronghold in the Dakhye. The IDF continues to strike Hezbollah terror infrastructure in Beirut with intense waves of attacks from the air and the sea. Among the targets struck terror infrastructure, weapons storage sites, Central Command headquarters, and the Air Force headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Beirut. So far, about 70 terror targets have been struck in the Beirut area alone, including approximately 50 high-rise buildings used by Hezbollah for terror activities. Several key operatives were also eliminated. Hezbollah placed its terror infrastructure in the heart of Beirut, under the cover of the civilian population, and over the past week, the IDF ordered the evacuation of residents from most of the Dakhye district in order to protect their safety. And as the war with Iran entered its 13th day with Israel, carrying out some of its most direct strikes yet inside the Iranian capital. The IDF says dozens of Air Force fighter jets struck key regime targets across Tehran and western Iran, including Revolutionary Guard Air Force headquarters, command and control centers, ballistic missile storage sites, and air defense positions. Additionally, the IDF struck a compound inside the IRGC's Central Military University, known as Imam Hussein, which the IDF says was being used by regime forces to coordinate operations and hold command meetings. The military also struck storage and production sites for ready-to-launch ballistic missiles, including missiles intended to target Israeli aircraft operating over Iran. And at the same time, Israel targeted internal security forces, including besieged bases and the headquarters of Iran's intelligence ministry, the regime's primary domestic surveillance and repression agency. Iran's semi-official media reports several besieged and security personnel were killed at checkpoints in northern and southern Tehran. The IDF says the strikes are part of a new phase of the campaign aimed at, quote, deepening the blow to the core systems of the Iranian regime. And meanwhile, tensions along the Strait of Hormuz continue. Iran is now warning that ships must seek its permission before passing through the strait, a threat that could further escalate the global energy crisis. The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy, Alireza Tangziri, said vessels that ignore Iranian warnings risk running into trouble in the strategic waterway. He cited ships that attempted transit this week and were targeted by Iranian forces. Iranian officials also warned that if Iran's ports are targeted, ports and docks across the region could become legitimate military targets. The U.S. military has meanwhile been removing naval mines in the strait, but has not escorted commercial shipping. About a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas normally passes through the strait. The U.S. says it destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels so far, while President Trump has demanded Tehran remove mines or face military consequences. And that's all the time we have at this hour, but follow us every hour here on ILTV for the latest updates on the region and keep up with us on social media. I'm Lidar Lazi. Thanks for watching.
The US-Israel-Iran war may be spiraling into something much bigger. Trump won't rule out U.S. troops. Israel is striking Iran's oil. Hezbollah threatens the north. The Houthis are watching. The question is no longer whether there's a war. It's this: is the entire region about to erupt? President Trump is not ruling out boots on the ground. Watch this.
Circumstances where you'd send in ground troops. How are you thinking about that?
I don't even want to talk about it now. I mean, that's, I don't think it's an appropriate question. You know, I'm not going to answer it. Could there be? Possibly, for very good reason. Have to be very good reason. And I would say if we ever did that, they would be so decimated that they wouldn't be able to fight at the ground level.
But I certainly will never take away military options on behalf of the President of the United States or the Commander-in-Chief, and he wisely does not do the same for himself. I know there's many leaders in the past who like to take options off of the table without having a full understanding of how things could develop. So again, it's not part of the current plan, but I'm not going to remove an option for the President that is on the table.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Quad. And we're still in war mode over here, so we're doing it remote. And I'm here in the studio in Jerusalem. My wonderful co-hosts, as ever, Emily Schrader, human rights activist and journalist, Shoshana Keats-Jaskal, co-founder of Chokhmat Nashim, Elevating Orthodox Women's Voices, and Rowan Osman, who is a Syrian, Lebanese, Middle East expert and activist who is currently in Israel. Okay, ladies, things are ramping up. Okay, the way that I see this, and people are going a bit crazy about this, is you would have to be really stupid to be the leader of a superpower and rule out boots on the ground, because you're basically then taking away the power of deterrence you are trying to put into your enemy in the middle of the war. Caroline Levitt also reiterated this, and people seem shocked. But wouldn't it be more shocking if they took if Trump took kind of the European tack that, oh, we're not doing this, and we're not doing that, and we're not doing this? And then where does that leave us, right, Emily?
I think this is just another example of the difference in strategies that we see. I mean, you put it exactly correctly when you compared it to what we're seeing what we've seen from European leadership. It's just Trump is approaching this and knows how to strong arm them in a way I think is much more appropriate. So it's not so surprising at all. And it definitely, you don't want to reveal your cards to your enemy. I mean, I think that should be obvious. I don't know why it's surprising. Trump says a lot of things.
Yeah.
We don't know why he says all the things that he says, but I know that a lot of them haven't happened. So well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what comes of this.
But also, I think, it's part of this whole psychological warfare, isn't it, Shoshana?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't know how crazy your neighbor is, you are not going to let your ball go on his side of the fence. You're not going to encroach upon him. Like, that's the whole point. It's called deterrence, right? And he tried for a long time to work it out with Iran without going and actually having hostilities. He built everything up, gave them a lot of time. It would be ridiculous of him to say, oh, my red line is boots on the ground, because all they would have to do is wait him out.
I know. And as we speak, of course, Israel is striking and the U.S. is striking major infrastructure. Yesterday, Israel hit the oil refineries. And of course, there's this huge talk about what's going to happen with the Kurds. Are they going to be the ground forces? Rowan, you have a lot of experience in this. You have been talking to the Kurds in Syria for a while. Tell us what your thinking is in terms of Kurdish forces being the boots on the ground that everybody's talking about.
So 3 weeks ago, I was in Erbil, Iraq, and I was surprised to listen to the Kurds who were upset seeing what's happening to their families in Syria. Nevertheless, they were preparing themselves to engage against Iranian forces, against Iranian intelligence agents in Iraq. And they told me that they think this is the moment where they could play a role, an instrumental role, to weaken the Iranian regime. And they were adamant and certain that the U.S. was going to intervene. And they were preparing themselves, not only in Iraq, but also in Syria and in Iran.
Yeah. Well, that we've seen the Kurds stepping up to the plate. We saw that happen in Syria. We've seen it happen everywhere. But Emily, I know that you're a little bit concerned that this will create some type of fragmentation within Iran. Is that a concern, or do we need everything dead right now?
Any invasion from any foreign entity is not going to be received well by the Iranians. Even the majority of Iranian Kurds don't want this. It would be catastrophic for the relations between Israel and the Iranian people. I mean, it would be a total betrayal. Territorial integrity is like non-negotiable for them. It would be hugely, hugely, hugely problematic. But the thing that's important to understand about the whole conversation with the Kurds is that everybody's denied it. For everybody, after it started to come up, even the Kurds denied it after the fact. The White House has denied it. Trump has said that he doesn't support that, and he's actually told them not to do something like that. It brings in a lot of sectarian interests that I don't think should be in the debate. If the Iranian Kurds, which many of them actually are armed, if the Iranian Kurds want to fight against the regime, then by all means they should. They should build a coalition with the Balochis and the Azeris and all the other groups of Iranians, all the other communities in the country some of them are working to mobilize that way. But to frame it as a Kurdish issue specifically, that's never going to fly with Iranians. Never. There will be a lot of pushback in a way that ultimately blows back at the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah.
Even if we're not involved.
Well, they always blame us. It doesn't matter if we're involved or not. The other interesting thing when we're talking about who's going to be on the ground is maybe a surprising, maybe a disappointment statement by Trump regarding the future leadership of Iran. Watch this.
Most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in.
Reza Pahlavi, is he an option at all in your mind?
I guess he is. Some people like him, and we haven't been thinking about too much about that. It would seem to me that somebody from within maybe would be more appropriate. I've said that. He looks like a very nice person. But it would seem to me that somebody that's there, that's currently popular, if there's such a person. But we have people like that. We have people that were more moderate. These were radical lunatics.
Now, I feel like we've seen this before with the whole Venezuela thing, right? So you've got Maria Machado, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, is friendly with Trump. She was seen widely in the world as the main Venezuelan opposition leader. But then Trump says, you know what, she doesn't have the backing. She doesn't have the people behind her. Maybe he's right. Maybe he knows something we don't. I've got friends in Venezuela who tell me that, in fact, Trump is right. And now it seems that he's not embracing the leader that the Iranian people in the diaspora, and it seems also on the ground, want, which is Reza Pahlavi, who himself has very modestly said he's only going to be a transitional leader. He's only there to help the transition, and then people can elect for themselves. Is Trump being unfair here? Do you think that there's somebody else in place? Do you think he wants the new supreme leader to be his puppet? I'm very confused as to where the Americans see the day after in Iran. Rowan, do you have any insights for us on this?
I definitely don't. Nobody knows what Trump is thinking and what kind of intelligence he's basing his statements on. However, I understand that if he endorses Pahlavi, we will see more resistance, even global resistance, because I met Iranians around the world who adore Pahlavi, and of course he is a potential leader, but many are opposed to him. Even our friend, the brilliant activist Masih Ali-Najad, is not fond of Pahlavi because there are those who remember the history of his father in Iran. What will come next, I don't know, but it certainly won't be Khamenei's son.
Well, let's hope not.
Well, Masih Ali-Najad praised him just a few days ago. She's been back and forth about him. She was also in a coalition with him before it dissolved under Women Life Freedom. So there's a long history going back and forth with those two. Also, Hamid Ismaili. But yeah.
No, I think that a lot of people, look, the monarchy is not what they want to go back to, but I think a lot of people recognize that if this is the one unifying leader at this very pivotal moment, then this is the leader that they have to get behind. I've had a lot of conversations with Iranians who are also not fans. They're not fans of the entourage of Pahlavi. But at the end of the day, I said to him, look, this is the moment. Like with Israel before 1948, there was a lot of division in the Zionist leadership movement. But at the end of the day, they had to get behind one leader in order to make it happen. That's what I keep telling them.
That's a really important point. And I feel like, I'm just sitting here in Israel, just taking care of what I can take care of, but I am online all the time. And the disinformation or the different information, I mean, for me, watching these videos of like Tel Aviv in cinders, like it's like Pompeii, like 2026, Tel Aviv, or like the rats are fleeing. And I'm like, you take a step back for a second because sometimes you just want to answer them. And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Why am I giving into this? And you realize this is part of the chaos campaign, right? They want to inundate you with falsehood. They don't care whether you believe it or not, but they know what it does to your brain psychologically. You just turn off and you don't trust anything. And you believe then someone who's like calm, making sense. I feel like we all need to kind of step back a second and like, what we're hearing, what we're seeing from where we are is, I don't want to even gander a percentage, maybe 50% accurate. And so I'm just like, I feel like sometimes people at home want to know, well, what can I do, right? What can I do? Take care of your family, your space, your people, make sure they're okay, and just do what you can do to support those voices coming out of Iran who are people that you've seen for a long time, not like these new bots that come out of nowhere, because there's a lot online of disinformation, a lot.
You can see identical messaging, like literally identical messaging. Tel Aviv is burning. They don't want you to see it. And they have a video from, I don't know, Afghanistan from 5 years ago. I mean, it's ridiculous. And with all that misinformation is a whole set of new misinformation that we're attacking Lebanon because we just apparently felt like it. Not because Hezbollah started attacking us. And honestly, I don't know whether you guys saw Michael Oren, Ambassador Michael Oren, in an interview in CNN, where he basically called them out and said, you just had a whole report about Israel attacking Lebanon and you didn't put it in the context that they'd been attacking us. Now, we have our own expert here with us. Rowan, you are Syrian Lebanese. You have family in Beirut. What are they telling you? And are they finally rejecting Hezbollah? What's going on there?
A lot of people are opposed to what Hezbollah is doing. Even those who believe in Hezbollah's goals, ideology, those who hate Israel, are asking, what is your strategic gain? You've obviously shown the world that you are incapable of defeating Israel, and that must be the understatement of the century. They are a joke. So they've been urged since October 8, 2023, to refrain from provoking Israel. And for 11 months, due to European Western naivety that urged restraint, that thought that diplomacy is going to change the hearts and minds of the leaders of the axis of resistance, that allowed Hezbollah to continue sending rockets into Israel, which brought a devastating war on an already weakened and suffering Lebanon. They stopped after the ceasefire. Now, the world was urging Hezbollah to please stay out of this war. You're not capable of helping Iran. And Ali Khamenei is up in smoke. You cannot influence this war. And still, millions of Lebanese are displaced. The IDF instructed the evacuation of the entirety of southern Lebanon. So the Lebanese, even those who are Shia, who used to support Hezbollah, are wondering, what is your plan? Because Khamenei said repeatedly after October 7 that no matter what the consequences will be in Lebanon, they will replace it, they will rebuild, etc. We've seen nothing of that happen. Nothing. So people are very angry and disappointed.
Well, Hezbollah got $1 billion since in the last year by the Islamic Republic, who maybe now is in no position to be sending more money. But one more question, Ron. What about Yosef Aoun? Does anybody believe that he's actually serious when he announces criminalizing Hezbollah and he's going to take control back of his country? Does anybody think he's serious and be capable of doing this?
People are wondering, they are skeptical. However, they know that a confrontation must be avoided in Lebanon. Hezbollah are ideologues, they're nasty, they're not like Hamas. Had they invaded the north, God forbid, they would have never stopped to steal or to rape anybody. They are truly into their vision, their apocalyptic project. So they are trying to avoid a confrontation, but also because they know they're not strong enough. Even the Lebanese army is not strong enough. The Lebanese army's chief recently in the USA, what an embarrassing moment, told Senator Lindsey Graham that Hezbollah is not considered a terrorist organization in Lebanon.
Oh, God.
Which ended the meeting immediately. People are being skeptical, feeling skeptical, even in Lebanon. However, they believe that he has a true intention to disarm Hezbollah. Is he capable? That is the big question. At the same time, they are seeing at least tens of thousands of Lebanese sleeping on the street, and the Lebanese government is not capable of helping them. There are serious steps being introduced, historical steps that happened in the past 2 weeks in Lebanon. We'll talk more about it. It's never happened that on a Lebanese checkpoint, Hezbollah members were arrested.
Wow.
But can the army force them to disarm? That can only happen with the help of the Americans, and the Lebanese are open for that. But when the chief of your army refuses to admit that they are a terror organization, then the intentions, the motivations, and the abilities are in question.
Absolutely. But the question really is, if Iran, if the Islamic Republic is on its way out, Emily, does Hezbollah continue to be a strategic threat to Israel?
Well, definitely not in the same way. I mean, you're taking out the sponsor of, well, not just Hezbollah, but most of these terror organizations in the Middle East. Yeah, it would be a total game changer in the big picture for their region. But I mean, they would continue to exist for a while, and I think then we would have to look forward at who the next challenge is in terms of sponsorship for these terror organizations, because we know that someone else will pop up, some other group eventually will pop up. But in terms of Hezbollah specifically, I mean, hard to say. Initially, they still have a lot of power. They have a lot of weapons.
Exactly.
But we'll have to deal with that as the next challenge. But trust me, that's a challenge I'd be happy to have.
Exactly, because if the Islamic Republic is not there, it's a challenge I think we could go. And I mean, Shoshana, I think that this is, in a way, Israel's opportunity. You know, the minute they started firing, it gave us an opening to finish the job that we didn't finish properly last year because we were busy fighting on so many fronts.
I personally have issue, like, I don't understand. I'm just being, it is supposed to like admit that out loud. I don't understand the motivation of Hezbollah seeing what's happening to the Iranian regime. What I know, jihad, okay. Somebody else has to be pulling some strings. If your papa, your sugar daddy is going down over here, what makes you think that's not going to happen to you? I don't know. I feel like there's someone behind even the Iranian regime. I feel like maybe like a China is pulling some strings.
They didn't have a choice. Maybe the Iranians are like, the Islamic Republic are like, listen, we've given you $30 billion over the last 20, 30 years. Time to, time to pony up. This is exactly what we funded you for. I mean, I think they were between a rock and a hard place, but now they've really doubled down. That's my fear, that at the beginning it was almost like symbolic rockets just to show that we're like doing daddy's job. And now they seem to be doubling down. Rowan, did you imagine this would happen? Or you're like, yeah, obviously it was going to happen?
Of course it's going to happen. This is what a Western mind doesn't understand. They are willing to die for what they believe. They would rather die in an honorable way with their dignity, standing strong, and they would never, ever surrender. Who on earth believed, other than the Westerners, that they're going to voluntarily give their arms back to the Lebanese forces? Not in a million years. They would rather die, all of them, till the last person, with their kids, and they would never surrender.
Yeah, well, so we have the same issue with Hamas in Gaza. Whoever thought that they were just going to hand over willingly their arms?
They'd rather die as martyrs, right?
They'd rather die as martyrs. And I think that's probably, you've hit the nail on the head here, that people in the West don't really understand what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an apocalyptic death cult that would rather go down with the ship and have the ship go down And I guess that's our fear. Isn't that our fear for Iran, Emily? That we keep attacking the military infrastructure. We're going to keep attacking. We're going to keep dismantling what we can. But look, they'll bring down people with them. What are we looking at here?
Well, I mean, of course, it's like a wounded animal, a wounded wild animal. It will lash out with whatever they have. We know already. I was just reading last night. We know already that they've been plotting terror attacks against Israelis abroad. They're very, very hungry for any kind of win. In the past, when they've been in a position like this with the heavy international pressure or pressure to attack the United States, what they perceive as after the assassination of Soleimani, that was when they shot down the PS-752, the commercial airliner that was full of their own civilians and absolutely zero American citizens. They did this in order to frame the United States, or that was their intent. And then it actually, because there was documentation of it and other people found out, so then they ended up having to confess that it was indeed them. But my point is that they'll do just about anything, including false flag attacks, in order to stay in power. We know that they have planned for multiple contingencies, which is a huge problem. We know that the new supreme leader, Mojtaba, is significantly worse and more cruel than his father. He's involved with the suppression of the protest movement in 2009, also a very brutal crackdown. And he is just as, if not even more hardline than his father was. So it's not looking good in terms of the leadership. But then you also have Larijani behind the scenes, who is pulling the strings with the IRGC. So all of that needs to be dealt with for this to actually be successful.
I was so encouraged by the first week on how much we managed to achieve in the first week. Were we lulled into a false sense of security that this could be done with in a few weeks, Shoshana? What do you think?
Well, it's got so many people in my house right now.
Shoshana,
Yes.
if you didn't have 20 people living in your house and in your shelter,
The
what would
answer
you
is
think?
yes. I think we honestly are obviously analyzing as much as we can. And it's incredible what the Israeli Air Force, what the Israeli IDF and the American have done together. The coordination, the absolute ability to do what they've done. It's crazy because at the end of the day, as much as it's scary, as much as we're going to the bomb shelter, we're okay. Overall, there are people dead. And someone else, unfortunately, was just killed. But I feel like for what's happening, for the amount of firepower, they're doing an amazing job. And yes, I did think it would be done soon. And now I'm thinking probably not for a while.
I mean, when you hear Trump speak and Hesketh speak, you think, honestly, we've destroyed their entire Navy. Their Air Force is non-existent. Of course, they've got a lot of drone capabilities. But more interestingly or tragically, they're really lashing out anywhere they can. And you think to yourself, okay, maybe the initial rationale behind it is let's push the Saudis and the UAE and everybody else and Kuwait and Qatar. Let's push them into pushing Trump to stop the war. And now, is it having the opposite effect, or is it just our kind of wishful thinking that is having the opposite effect? Because they seem to be standing their ground quite well, the Gulf, more than I actually ever imagined. Emily, what do you think about that?
I think they've massively overplayed their hand when it comes to bombing literally every single country that they can reach around them. They've bombed what, 12 countries now in the past week? It's insane. It's crazy, and I'm pleased to see that many of these countries have taken a very strong stance against the Islamic Republic, have not resorted to saying, "Oh well, it's Israel's fault and it's Israel who did this." Of certainly the United States is partially to thank for that reaction, I think. But the idea that they fired more ballistic missiles and suicide drones at the UAE than they have at Israel, I mean, they're lashing out. Like this regime is losing control. And my favorite part was how the regime's president Masoud Pezeshkian, he's apologized to these countries, just on Sunday. Yeah, he apologized to them and said, we're going to stop attacking these countries. And like a few hours later, Bahrain and UAE were both attacked again. So they continued this. I think the IRGC doesn't have a connects to some of the political bodies right now. I mean, nobody really knows what's going on. So that's a good thing. That's expected at this point if we're on course, but we'll see what happens.
Ron, do you think Emily's correct? I really believe, exactly like Emily, they've overplayed their hand. Even Qatar is talking and seems angry. Or are we really not seeing the full picture? How do your friends in the Gulf speak to you right now? Because I've had some conversations, and that most of them are being very, very kind of steadfast resilience. I can't believe we're facing the same enemy. Thank God for the Abraham Accords. And then I hear different voices saying they're going to blame us in the end for all of this.
They've lost all their friends, except those in the West who are crying for the death of Khamenei, those who have never been to our region. They've lost all their friends. They're literally dying and trying to inflict as much pain and damage in the region as much as possible.
Yeah.
To play the victims, because many in the West believe them, unfortunately. But let's take a step back and look at what's really happening here. You don't have to like Bibi and Trump. And those leaders are not meant to become your husbands. They are not your best friends. They are leaders. And in those moments, in such moments, you do know who's a true leader and who is not. This would have never been achieved. This decimation or near decimation of the axis of resistance would have never been achieved had many, many, many events did not take place in the past decade, including the Abraham Accords, which helps us understand today who is our ally and who is our enemy.
Yeah.
The way everybody came together to fight against this mad beast in Iran is unprecedented. And it sets the tone and the direction for the future Middle East. I'm very optimistic, even though it's going to take a while, but we are witnessing the end of the axis of evil.
Oh my God, Ron, I hope, honestly, from your mouth to God's ears, I truly believe that. This is what my friends in the Gulf are telling me. But I hope that that this is really the beginning of the end and the beginning of a new region, because that's really all we've ever wanted. Okay, and on that positive note, we go to our very popular, and every week more and more scumbags appear. We can't really wade through enough of these people, especially now, because at times of war is where you can see who's a hero and who's a scumbag. So, scumbag of the week. Shoshana, let's start with you. Who's your scumbag this week?
You know, yesterday was International Women's Day, and my scumbag is a woman who denies the rape and suffering of other women, Israeli women. Brianna Joy Gray has tweeted at least twice this week, saying once, unlike the mass rape hoax, the 160 children of the U.S. of Israel murdered, I see what she did there, U.S. of Israel murdered in a double tap strike are very real. And she also retweeted someone who said, absolutely zero named allegations of rape by Israelis by Palestinians on October 7th. No allegations, let alone evidence. And this woman, she's the one who eye rolled when sister of a hostage was speaking on her show.
Ronen sister.
Thank you. You have to be such an evil human being to continue to deny the rape and sexual assaults, especially even after they've come out of captivity and spoken. Numerous, both men and women, have spoken about the rape that they have gone through in captivity, let alone October 7th. And I just have to say, Brianna, you are truly a scumbag. You are many choice words that I can't say because I don't say these things out loud, but truly you have to be an evil woman to deny sexual assault and rape, no matter how badly you want to hate a country.
So true. There's a special place in hell for women like her. The good news is she got fired from her job after the eye roll. I'm not sure where she's landed, so she might be annoyed about the fact she doesn't have a job, but she is only evil women, the same believe women crowd who don't believe Israeli women, and they're not believing Iranian women either, who are being tortured and raped before they get killed under the IRGC. Anyway, fantastic scumbag. I'm glad you brought it up. It is International Women's Month, and International Women's Day was yesterday. And we pray that in this International Women's Month, we will see the liberation of the women of Iran who are living under a female Holocaust. Honestly, no other way to look at it. Emily, who's your scumbag this week?
Well, I guess we have a theme today because I also have a rape denier, the wife of Mamdani, Rama Douaji. So this woman who is, I believe, of Syrian descent, it was discovered this week that she's been very active on social media. She's been liking lots and lots of posts glorifying October 7th. She liked a post that was calling what happened on October 7th a mass rape hoax. Nice one. She also liked a bunch of photos and videos of Hamas actually committing the massacres of October 7th. And, Mamdani came out in response saying, oh, well, it's my wife's views, not mine, and she's not a public figure. She's a private citizen, whatever, fine. But, it's just more fuel for the fire, more evidence that proves exactly where the Mamdanis really stand on these issues. This is not a normal mainstream view. He's a fringe extremist who surrounds himself with even more fringe extremists that do not have the best interests of Americans, or certainly not New Yorkers, as his priority. And I don't think anybody should be trusting this person. I mean, New York is in for a world of hurt. It's already started, but it's only the beginning.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he can't pick up the rubbish or plow the snow, but, has a lot of views on geopolitics. And, this excuse, oh, it's my wife and not me. If Melania had said anything, which is the mildest thing in the world, nobody would have said, oh, it's his wife and not him. The hypocrisy also of the media, to give her a free pass on being a terrorist sympathizer is disgusting. She is a very worthy scumbag. Thank you, Emily. Okay, Rowan, I can't wait to hear yours. Who's your scumbag this week?
I'm never comfortable in calling anybody scumbag, but this time I'll do it gladly. Naim Qassem, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah. I mean, at least the former one, at least Hassan Nasrallah had charisma. He had a brain. This guy is useless, he's spineless, he's a parrot, and he's so egoistic. In his last address to the Lebanese people, he said that they will continue with their assault against Israel until death. You can die alone. He's obviously committing suicide, condemned every member of Hezbollah to suicide, but I'd rather they did it on their own. And he's insisting he might be following the directions of the Iranians because, as you said, Fleur, they owe them a lot of money, etc. But I don't care. The amount of egoism you must have watching 1 million barefoot sleeping on the streets in Lebanon. The amount of people who are begging him, literally begging him to shut up already, and he's not listening. So, as he's decided that he's going all the way with this, and as the Israeli defense minister recently said that Naim Qassem is now on their hit list, please, Israel, do grant him his wish.
Yeah. Yes, it's a great scumbag. You're right. He's got zero presence. I mean, but he got the job, which means he's on the hit list, and he's indeed a scumbag. Thank you very much. Now, I'm changing tact a little bit. Last week, I made Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron my scumbags for being wimps and weak. And I got hundreds of messages on my social media from good Spaniards saying to me, why didn't you add Pedro Sanchez to that list? And I responded and I said, because Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, deserves his own scumbag. I didn't want to lump him in with the two wimps. I wanted to give him his own spotlight because honestly, it doesn't get worse than Pedro Sanchez in Europe. He is the agent of China. He is the agent of Venezuela. Before Maduro got arrested, that was a tough break for Pedro Sanchez. He is part of this international socialist cabal that is basically allying himself with the worst perpetrators of human rights violations in the world, and yet he has the chutzpah, the cheek, to call himself standing in anti-war. So what happened in the last week and a half? That he basically said that the U.S. could not use Spanish bases to use for the offensive or defensive or anything else. Now, he also said that they should continue to try and negotiate dialogue, even though he knows how poisonous the Islamic regime is. And in all of the massacres that the Islamic regime did on their own people, that dignified him to make one tweet about being concerned about the people of Iran. That's all he cared. But of course, since Trump and Israel went to try and eliminate the main threat to humanity, all he's done is criticize Israel and the US and declared big declarations that he's anti-war and he's not allowing them to use his bases. Now, I love the way that Trump said, listen, if we wanted to use your bases, we would just use them. Secondly, Spain is part of NATO. Let's not forget, Spain is part of NATO. They don't pay their dues. They haven't paid their increased dues that Trump insisted on. And in fact, this is where the hypocrisy lies. They want to use the protection of the US in NATO, but at the same time, they want to ally themselves with the worst dictatorships in the world. And if you don't have proof enough of what a scumbag Pedro Sanchez is, the Iranian Islamic Republic congratulated him. They sent him a thank you note for standing on the right side of history. And all of this, please everyone, let's not forget, is wrapped in the fact that he is surrounded with corruption charges. His wife has been indicted. His brother has been indicted for having a fake job that Pedro Sanchez got to him. And the people of Spain have had it. He's been in power for 8 years and hasn't had a budget for 3 against the Constitution. And the people, he can't give a speech anywhere because he gets booed everywhere. The good people of Spain understand what a corrupt, horrible leader. And the best thing is that Trump then threatened that they were going to cut trade ties with Spain. And the next day he came out defiant, saying he didn't care. And his little foreign minister crawled into the White House to try and put out that fire. So Pedro Sanchez, you have been the most frequent scumbag from me. I think this is the 4th time. You are a hypocrite, you are corrupt, and you're an anti-Semite. Eres un hipócrita, eres un antisemita, y eres un corrupto. Y la gente de España están hartos de ti. So, Pedro Sanchez, for the 4th time, it's a record, you are my scumbag of the week.
Did you see the Iranians go to the Israeli embassy in Spain and throwing flowers? It's the best. After he came out, they said, they're like, we don't believe that. We don't feel that way. And they're like tossing flowers. The guard's like, what are you doing? They're like, we just want to give flowers to the Israelis for saying.
They've been screaming against him, and also a message also came out in the Spanish European Parliament and actually reprimanded him publicly and said, why are you standing with the people killing my people? How dare you? So yeah, I mean, but the thing is that the Spanish people hate him. That's the thing. They really can't stand him. There's a very small minority of people that are still standing with him, very small, because I'm getting messages all the time from Spanish people saying, we've had it, please make him your scumbag of the week. And so I abide. We need to cleanse our souls with a little bit of positivity so that we can really withstand another week of Iranian Islamic regime attacks on our country and running to shelters. So we need to bring some positive vibes. And we go to our heroes of the week. Shoshana, who's your hero this week?
Oh, my heroes, my heroines are the female pilots, navigators, support staff, at least 30 in the Israeli Air Force, and I'm sure many more in the American Air Force. These videos are like if the crazy bad videos are like depressing, these videos are like the opposite of kryptonite, whatever that is. I'm loving it. I'm inhaling it, like injected in my veins. These women, I love it. The idea that like American and Israeli women are going in and taking down the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime, is chef's kiss for me, and I'm loving it. And I just like, can you just pick me up on the way? I'll like gotta go. Just bring me. I want to go. I know it sounds like very childish, but like I love it. It just, these women are my heroines. They're there. They're doing the hard work, ejecting out of airplanes. That the Kuwait army shot down 3, and the woman just like, what's up? Here I am. It just gives me a lot of positive vibes. And every time like they fly over, I'm wondering if there's a lady in there, if there's a woman in there, like fulfilling her dream of being a pilot and trying to save a lot of women and girls from a horrible, horrible regime.
And liberating the women of Iran. And really just, I couldn't agree more. It really is oxygen to us right now. It's wonderful to watch.
I wish they would go a little further and go into and take out the Taliban, but I know we can't do that.
Maybe next time, maybe the next. I mean, who are your heroes or heroines?
So my heroines this week is the Iranian national women's football team. They are currently in Australia competing, and they, as a symbol of protest, refused to sing the national anthem at the opening ceremony of the match that they're at, the tournament that they're at. And the Islamic Republic immediately came out threatening them. There were calls to deal with them as they deal with collaborators with the enemy and the Zionists and all those terms that they love to throw out there when they return to Iran. So there's been a lot of concern for their safety, obviously. I myself am worried based on what we're seeing from the Islamic Republic in response. In the second match, they did sort of sing the national anthem at the beginning of the match, but the damage was already done, and there's a lot of discussion and concern that their families will be persecuted as well. Now, that's one of the things that the Islamic Republic has always used to lord over the heads of athletes and public figures who do have the ability to travel abroad. But right now, there's a bit of a crisis going on inside Australia because there were literally protests outside these events, these football matches. There were Iranians who were begging these girls to defect and to stay in Australia, knowing that their lives were at risk. And of course, they know this as well. They've been watched like hawks by the regime officials that travel with these athletes who travel abroad. They probably have no physical way to even be able to defect if that's what they wanted. But that's the situation right now. They're currently still, as of now, inside their hotel, I'm told, on lockdown. Instead of intervening or issuing a statement or anything like that, the Australian government has done nothing, has not stated that they would provide these girls with any kind of protection. And when one of the buses drove away at the end of the match, there was a video that surfaced last night of some of the players signaling help in sign language to the protesters who were outside. Now, the protesters actually tried to stop this bus physically, and then the Australian police intervened and forced all of the protesters to leave so that the bus could drive away with those girls. It's just a really disgusting scene to look at. They're obviously in danger. We're talking about a psychotic regime that is on the verge of falling. We know that those girls are going to be persecuted in one way or the other with their families. I mean, the Australian government needs to step up and do something now because this has the potential to be massive. So these are my heroes for their courage despite all odds. But it's also really a call to action that people need to apply pressure to Australia right now and other countries as well. I know a few people were like, bring them all to Canada. We don't care. Bring the whole team. Let them defect. But their lives are certainly in danger.
For sure, their lives are in danger. And it's really disgusting that the Australians are not that the Australian government is not trying to do more. Who the hell are they pandering to? And
How is
what?
that defensible?
It's ridiculous.
How is it defensible? How do they not?
This is what you exist. You are a society supposed to be democratic and free. This is the reason you exist, to give shelter, not to economic migrants, but to these type of people who are under persecution. Their lives are in danger if they go back to their country. What are you worth? You can't even do this. What are you worth? Yeah. Disgraceful. But they are heroines, and there is kind of this international sign of help, isn't it, for women. And they were doing that. It killed me when I saw that bus, and it really made my stomach churn. And I wish we could give them immunity and somehow they could come here. But like you say, Emily, it's also their families. What are they going to do with their families that are still back home? That's the danger. Oh, God protect them. God protect them, and give people the clarity to do the right thing. Rowan, who is your hero this week?
My hero this week is called Sami Jmail. He's the head of the Kataib party in Lebanon. A few days ago, they held a conference in Le Gray Hotel in Beirut, discussing the pros and cons of normalization with Israel. That is a first. Talking about a taboo. In the past 60 years, nobody would dare even discuss peace with Israel. But now it's time. And if all the Lebanese had the spine Sami Jmail has, we would have gotten rid of Hezbollah a long time ago. Bear in mind that his uncle, Bashir Jmail, was assassinated in the 80s, and he is one of the very few Lebanese who spoke directly to the Israelis, received them in Beirut. Now it's no longer a secret. And although every prominent voice in Lebanon was assassinated not long ago, after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, a lot of people in Lebanon dare speak up. What is done is unprecedented. They did not decide to go for peace with Israel, but the sheer fact, creating a platform attended by politicians, journalists, policymakers, discussing the pros and cons and criticizing Hezbollah is a massive, massive event. And a few days ago, he called upon the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army to arrest all Hezbollah members, to arrest Naim Qassem, arrest the Secretary General, force them to disarm. They will not do it voluntarily. He also called upon the Lebanese government to sever all diplomatic ties with the Iranians and to expel their diplomats. And he called them explicitly agents collaborating with the IRGC or agents of the IRGC who were wounded during the pager operation. We have proof. We will not forgive them. Remember the massive explosion at the harbor in Beirut.
Yes.
They've caused enough damage already, and I truly admire his stance, and may he inspire more and more Lebanese. Sami Jmail, you're my hero this week.
Amen. Absolutely. These are the heroes when they come out against the grain and put their lives at risk in order to do the right thing for their country and their people. Wonderful. And I mean, we hope that he's very successful. Maybe he could even be a government leader of the future, hopefully. These are the type of leaders that we need to make a new region. So I'm changing a little bit tact. My hero this week is a Spanish guy staying with Spain called Aldo Comas. Why is he my hero? Now, he in Spain, there's these, awards like movie, TV, art awards, like we see in Hollywood every other week. And in Spain, they're called the Goya Awards. And so everybody shows up to this Goya Awards. Everybody's wearing their little, watermelon, free Palestine zombies. And he gets stopped and asked at the entrance of the awards, so what do you think? What do you think about what's going on? And he says, what I'm really surprised to see is that nobody's saying a word about the 50,000, 30,000 innocent Iranians that have been killed by the regime. Why is it that nobody is talking about the fact that more innocent Iranians have been killed than in the whole entire Gaza war, and they're still giving us these little watermelons to wear? Why is nobody talking about this?
Yo no he oído a nadie hablar de los 50.000 muertos que ha habido los últimos 2 meses en Irán. Nadie habla de ello. Veo muchos pins de todo, pero de eso no lo sé. Quizá también hemos de acabar con regímenes teocráticos que asesinan a sus poblaciones.
This guy, Aldo, all right, who I didn't even know existed, but he's done what no artist in any country, anywhere in the world, the whole of Hollywood, think about the Grammys and the Emmys and the Critics' Choice Awards and all of these awards that have happened in the last few weeks. And nobody has said a word about Iran. Not one person. And this guy in Spain goes to these awards full of these woke zombie idiots. And he goes and says, why isn't anybody talking about Iran? The next day, when he got, you can imagine how many messages of hate he got. He also got a lot of messages of thank you by Iranians, saying thank you for being the only person in this whole genre around the world who's talking about our plight. And then he went and he doubled down. And you know what he said? He said all of the whole industry is set around the whole Free Palestine movement. We get given and shoved in our faces these little badges, whether we want them or not, on the watermelon. And I've had it, because this is hypocrisy. And so for speaking out, for being the only person in this genre in the entire world, in all of these, shows of people giving each other awards, the only person talking about the innocent Iranians' plight has been this Aldo Comas. So for me, he's my hero this week.
It's a great hero.
Really, it's just incredible. And the next day he doubled down. He didn't try and get out of it. He says, I can't take this watermelon anymore. He gets shoved in our faces, he said. It's amazing. Anyway, thank God that for so many scumbags, there's so many heroes, and we will continue to pray for the end of the evil in the region and around the world. The world has its test right now, the way that they did in the 1930s with the Nazi regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran and all of their friends, they're getting less, as Rohan said. They are the Nazis of our era. See where everybody's going to stand, and we pray for the liberation of the innocent people in Iran and the entire region. And we hope to see you next week. Keep safe, everyone.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with the welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kol El Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kol El Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help, and you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kol El Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Ladar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the latest headlines from across the region. It's currently 11 a.m. in New York and 5 p.m. here in Israel, where we enter day 13 of the war with Iran. Let's recap all of the latest developments. Missile fire continues today from Lebanon and Iran as sirens sent millions throughout the country into bomb shelters throughout the day. Missiles were intercepted this morning over Jerusalem area and over central Israel in the afternoon. Overnight, Hezbollah launched more than 100 rockets at northern Israel in a massive barrage in what officials say was a coordinated attack with Iran. Sirens sounded across the north as projectiles struck multiple areas, including a direct hit on a home in the Upper Galilee. 5 people were injured, mostly from shock and flying debris. Emergency crews from Magen David Adom, United Hatzalah, and fire and rescue services were deployed across the region to treat the wounded, extinguish fires, and search for additional damage. The IDF says Hezbollah fired the rockets from southern Lebanon the same time Iranian projectiles triggered sirens in parts of central Israel and Judea and Samaria. Israeli officials say the military is now preparing for a possible expansion of attacks by both Hezbollah and Iran as tensions continue to escalate on multiple fronts. And joining us now with more on the latest on Israel's home front is ILTV's executive editor Mayan Hoffman, joining us from Jerusalem. Mayan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So continuing intense day here in Israel, in the north and throughout the center. You've been, in Jerusalem, in the center today. What can you tell us about what's been happening in the country?
Sure. Well, I think we need to start up north. As we talked about overnight, there were more than 200, or in the last 24 hours, over 200 missiles and drones fired from Hezbollah onto northern Israel. That was in coordination, actually, overnight with Iran. That was our second major attack taking place since the start of the war. There were several direct hits, no major injuries, only light injuries. In fact, the direct hit of the visuals that we saw before on a house in the Upper Galilee was the house of an elderly woman named Abe. They had 90 seconds to get to the shelter and still managed. But today we're starting to hear from the residents and the leaders in the north that this can't go on much longer. The mayor of Kiryat Shmona was appealing to the government in Jerusalem today, begging them to take some kind of action. I need to remind you, Lidar, that these people only returned to their homes about a year ago. These are the same homes that were evacuated for a year and a half while we fought, Hezbollah and in Gaza for the better part of 2.5 years. In March of last year, they started to return home. And here we are a year later with rockets again coming down from Hezbollah. So there's a lot of tension. Young children in bomb shelters for really the last 11 days, unable to really leave their homes because the bombs come so much quicker. But we have an Iranian alert. There's some time. There's a warning, and then there's the siren. When it comes to Hezbollah, there's very little time, and it's seriously impacting the people of northern Israel. Now, if you talk about the rest of the country, you asked about central Israel, Jerusalem. There wasn't some shrapnel that hit down earlier today in Jerusalem. Again, nobody was really injured. Most of the injuries we're seeing at this point are from people that are running to their bomb shelters. Just a reminder, to the viewers that are watching Israel, it's very important to walk slow and steady to the bomb shelter, even though you need to, of course, make it there before the rockets hit down. But at the same time, a lot of the injuries that we're seeing, the over 2,000 people who have been in the hospital, the majority of them have actually been because of accidents that have happened and not to the bomb shelters.
Absolutely. So we're seeing really difficult conditions for people in the north. Mayan, we've also heard of reported terror attacks today throughout Israel. We had recently a stabbing incident in Ramat Gan in central Israel. That's still under investigation. It's unclear if that was something criminal or if that was a terror attack. And we're receiving reports right at this moment that there was another incident in the Tapuach Junction of a possible terrorist attack. I mean, we're hearing these stories coming in. What can you tell us about sort of the mood in the country, in Jerusalem right now, in light of all that's going on?
Yeah, Lidar, it's such a good question. People are really on edge. At the beginning with the war, we felt that this was going to be very short-lived. Israel took out Khamenei on that first day, and there was really this feeling of triumph. We're seeing now that the regime is much slower to fall, and that even though Israel's IDF has reported taking out the majority of the missile launchers and has also taken out the majority of the air defenses, we're still seeing that the war is going to be waging on. We're hearing, for example, the kids are not going to go back to school in most of the country for at least another week. Parents are being asked to work, kids are at home, and there's a lot of tension because these, what we're calling reported terror attacks right now, as you said, they're still under investigation. There were several incidents, but on the other hand, we expected to see, in the previous 2.5 years of war, we would see these lone wolf or these smaller attacks taking place in the Judea and Samaria, in areas of Jerusalem, etc. And there's a worry that as this war wages on, with rockets from Hezbollah, there's a potential for the Houthis, remember, from Yemen to join. We had another front with them during the last 2.5 years. They've been mysteriously quiet so far, and analysts are starting to question whether or not they too might join in. And of course, here in the area, we have a number of terrorist organizations, unfortunately, sitting right on our borders, Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Hamas as well has been quite quiet. We've had a few incidents in Gaza, but really with them joining the war. But everyone's on edge and really starting to feel that this could heat up before it gets better.
And man, I just want to say, right now we're seeing on the screen the visuals of this stabbing attack in Ramat Gan, really horrific, very violent scene there. The perpetrator ran off, but I think he's been apprehended by police. That's the latest we're hearing, and of course is under investigation. And we're also receiving at this hour more information about the event at the Tapuach Junction. We understand that there was an attempt at a car ramming incident there, and that there were 2 terrorists involved. They tried to do what I understand is a joint car ramming and shooting incident in the Shomron. Both of these terrorists were neutralized on the scene. So as you said, really, we're getting these rockets, we're getting these missiles. Everyone's already on edge, and now we're seeing an increased uptick in attempts at terrorist attacks here on the ground in Israel. In light of all this, Mayan, you mentioned the schools. Is Homefront Command considering changing any of the guidelines, restricting any of the guidelines in light of sort of these new developments?
Well, what we understand is that they're going to be evaluating again on Saturday night. The Homefront Command regulations are in place until at least after Shabbat, and then they will let us know if they're going to get stricter, stay the same, or loosen. I think you can surmise from hearing, the education ministry today saying that students in the north and in the center are going to be on Zoom for at least another week, that most of these regulations are going to stay in place. I think also when you're seeing the rockets, as I mentioned, coming from Hezbollah with such little amount of time for people in the north to get to their shelters, that to have young children, for example, in schools would be quite dangerous. One of the reasons for those evacuations during the war was this, and there were some direct hits, if you recall, on schools and preschools in the north during that period when people, of course, were not learning there. But if the kids were learning there, that could have been really, really drastic and detrimental.
Absolutely. Mayan Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us and for staying with us through all these latest updates.
Thank you, Lidar.
And meanwhile, residents across northern Israel, including the Galilee and the Golan, have been urged to stay near their shelters. Local councils and mayors issuing special instructions to minimize their time outdoors, avoid social gatherings. And even ahead of last night's massive barrage on the north, since the war began, Israel has identified more than 450 launches from Lebanon. That's not including the 100 from last night, 250 from Iran, and over 200 drone attacks combined. And so Homefront Commander Shai Klepel said this to the residents of the north. Let's listen.
עברנו לילה מאתגר עם מספר אזעקות. אזרחי ישראל בכלל ותושבי הצפון בפרט. עברנו למעלה משנתיים וחצי, שנתיים מורכבות ומאתגרות. פיקוד העורף פרוס בפריסה ארצית רחבה ופועל בשיתוף פעולה עם כלל ארגוני החירום, עם משטרת ישראל, עם קב"א ועם מד"א ועם הרשויות המקומיות. מתוך זה עליתי היום צפונה לשבת עם הרשויות המקומיות ולפגוש בהנהגה ובציבור. פגשתי הנהגה אחראית, מקצועית ואמיצה שמפגינה חוסן בלתי רגיל. אני מודע לאתגרים שהמציאות הביטחונית מציבה לנו.
And now we turn to a special report from a foreign journalist from Los Angeles, California, Mark Franklin. He's in Israel's north reporting for ILTV News. Let's take a look.
If you have been following the latest round of fighting between the U.S. and Israel versus Iran and Hezbollah, you've probably heard reports from Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Beit Shemesh, Eilat, Haifa, but probably not the small city of Carmiel.
We were kind of getting ready for it, for each day we didn't know when it will come, so finally we went to our parents. They have a mamad.
My mother, she's more anxious about it, and my father is pretty chill. He go to work, and I don't know, he does everything pretty normal.
I think we all gotten pretty used to it.
Yeah.
I think the best thing to do in Carmiel is the schnitzel place over there. It's a famous schnitzel place.
A good one.
I work here part-time, so sometimes I come to here and sometimes there are alarms. Almost all the people, they say we are willing to pay the price, okay, the price of war, but we want to get results. In Lebanon, we are now conquered for the fifth time. Carmiel, like on the north of Israel, they're not afraid of the war. They're not afraid of the Hezbollah, the Lebanons, or whatever. The people of Israel, they know that God is with us. You know, God is looking down and said, how stupid can you be? 5 times I'm giving you the land that I promised your ancestors, and then you are what? Giving it back to who and for what?
My name is David. I like living in Carmiel because here I have a nice house with property, I have trees, a garden. It's also not heavily congested. We've stayed all along. I was with my wife and we were visiting my daughter in a small town called Zichron Yaakov. We were in synagogue when we heard sirens blaring, so we were quite apprehensive and worried about what would be. Well, since I returned to Carmiel, it's been a bit of an exercise. I sleep on the 3rd floor and the shelter is in the basement. I'll have to walk down 37 steps and up 37 steps. Sometimes 5, sometimes 8 times a night. During the day we have to go down. We're always worried. We hear loud explosions. We're here. We're not going anywhere. We're just staying here, and we're going to keep our good prayers and thoughts with our soldiers and do the best we can.
That's it for Mark Franklin, your stranded videographer from California. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you to Mark Franklin, our stranded videographer, as he said, for the report and for bringing us some of these voices from Carmiel, a little town in the north. And moving on, in other news, Regavim has been sounding the alarm for 2 decades, warning about the strategic and security threats posed by illegal Arab construction and other forms of annexation, posing as innocent civilian activity. Tragically, the events of October 7th verified Regavim's worst fears, but the same scenarios and worse can and must be prevented. Regavim works on the ground, in the courts, and in the Knesset to monitor illegal land seizures, defend the rule of law, and safeguard Israel's national lands, especially in key regions like Judea and Samaria. And so at a time when Israel is confronting threats on multiple fronts, protecting these areas is more important than ever. So if you, our viewers, want reliable data and deeper insight into what's happening beyond the headlines, you can scan the QR code on your screen or visit regavim.org and sign up for their newsletter. Learn how you can stay informed and play a role in safeguarding the land of Israel. And moving on, in response to the overnight barrage from Hezbollah, the Israeli military resumed intensive and ongoing airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Beirut's southern suburbs, including the group's stronghold in the Dakheh. The IDF continues to strike Hezbollah terror infrastructure in Beirut with intense waves of attacks from both the air and the sea. Among the targets struck, terror infrastructure, weapons storage sites, Central Command headquarters, and the Air Force headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Beirut. So far, about 70 terror targets have been struck in the Beirut area, including approximately 50 high-rise buildings used by Hezbollah for terror activities. Several key operatives were also eliminated. Hezbollah placed its terror infrastructure in the heart of Beirut under the cover of the civilian population, much like we saw Hamas do in Gaza. Over the past week, the IDF has ordered the evacuation of residents from most of the Dakheh district in order to protect their safety. And joining us now with the latest in the escalation with Lebanon and the war with Iran are Ambassador Dani Ayalon, chairman of Silver Road Capital Group and the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, and Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, former commander of 8200 Intelligence Unit in the IDF. Thank you both for joining us today. So, Hanan, I'd like to start with you. You know, we saw an unprecedented, coordinated attack from Iran and its terror proxy Hezbollah last night. Is Israel heading for a full-out war with Hezbollah, a ground invasion of Lebanon?
Well, we have to understand that Hezbollah right now has converted into being a military unit of Iranian. It's actually a military, we can consider Hezbollah a brigade or brigade plus as part of the Iranian army. We're still looking into it. Who made the decision? Because Hezbollah is alienated itself from the Lebanese, to the Lebanese people, even from its own base. Right now, there are over 1 million Shiites. His base are on the roads, leaving the southern part because Israel asked them to leave to be safe. And enable Israel to take care of the military parts of Hezbollah, which are right now considered an Iranian unit for whatever it means, the Iranian unit. They are not working on their own. They are part of the Iranian efforts. And I believe that, well, if you look at the end game, when Iranian will be taken, will stop fighting, whatever the reason will be at that time, Hezbollah will follow, and in the meantime, they have actually distancing themselves from the Lebanese scenery, from the Lebanese people, the Lebanese government, and even from their own people.
Now, Dani, turning to you, you know, Hezbollah's capabilities were largely diminished these past 2 years, but it's clear that they've spent the duration of this U.S. brokered ceasefire to rebuild and to rearm. So what is your assessment of the ceasefire? This seems to be a mistake on Israel's part. I mean, what's your analysis of this and of the right way to move forward? Because clearly diplomacy is not working in this case.
Yes, well, remember the ceasefire basically was brokered by the United States at the time under the presidency of Biden. And it was after sufficiently degrading the Hezbollah capabilities. So I think Israel willingly went into it. And we have to remember that with this ceasefire, we kept our 5 forward posts, military posts inside South Lebanon, as well as we retained the self-defense rights, and we kept attacking anytime they breached it. Unfortunately, we see that with this type of radical terrorism, whether it's coming from Hamas or from Hezbollah or Iran for that matter, With them, there is no compromise. It's do or die. And this is a lesson we have heard and we have learned from the 7th of October. So we have no other choice but going all the way and diminish Hezbollah's capabilities to the best of our ability, with the hope that there is also a political arm here with the strategy, and that is to bring the Lebanese government, and they pretty much have been trying to do that, to outlaw Hezbollah and also to collect their arms, just as the ceasefire initially was describing. So this is something that we went opened eyes with, and Hezbollah, it seems like they are taking a page and a chapter from their masters in Tehran, where they go all out in a suicidal mission.
So, Danny, I do want to get back to you on the Lebanese government point in just a minute. But Hanan, I want to turn to you first and understand, as we mentioned, Israel really diminished Hezbollah's capabilities over nearly 2 years of fighting. We saw, of course, the famous pagers operation, beepers operation. But what is your assessment of Hezbollah's capabilities today?
Hezbollah has left over. We don't know how much. That's the problem. And more than that, Hezbollah was with the help of the Iranian advisor, Iranian experts, has rebuilt some of its capabilities, mainly in, I would say, more northern parts of Lebanon, in the Bekaa Valley, bordering Syria. Just right now, the IDF spokesperson has asked the people of the Shiites down in Lebanon to move further to the north, because we are going to extend our activities there to take some more capabilities out of Hezbollah arsenal. But we have to remember that a great part of it, the big missiles, are hidden in the Bekaa Valley, far away from the Israeli borders, and that has to be taken differently. We hope that the ceasefire could have, we hope it will solve part of the problem. Right now, Israel has to plan to be more active in the Lebanese arena to take care of these activities. The Lebanese army, the Lebanese chief of staff is actually under pressure, tremendous pressure to resign, because he did nothing. He submitted reports that he did clean this area, that area, and it turned out that nothing has been made. So we have to wait. And just to make one clear point, I wasn't asked about it. The home front of Israel is working exceptionally. 10 million people under constant alert, obeying all the orders received through this smartphone is our safeguard. We are all moving with this smartphone, getting a report, move to shelter, and 10 million people are moving to shelter. I'm mentioning it because one of the factors that Hezbollah and the Iranians were building on is the strength of the Israeli home front. They believe that the Israelis under the pressure will succumb. And that's why they are targeting that 100 missiles a night, hoping that things will change in Israel. This is their, I would say, last resort. And the picture you have, the videos you have just saw from Carmiel, the strength of the people, it's all over Israel. Children, kids, all get used to it. And we have the patience to go through, because we understand that we have seen the Hezbollah, military part of Iran. We understand Iran is the same. And we have to have this patience. And we have this patience.
Absolutely. I mean, the resilience of the Israeli home front is important to note. And Danny, turning back to you regarding the situation inside of Lebanon, the Lebanese government, as you mentioned, they issued really an unprecedented rebuke of the terror group of Hezbollah's terror group, and yet we see that the Lebanese army is unwilling or perhaps unable to really address the arms that Hezbollah maintains and its illegal activity inside of Lebanon. So where does this stand now in terms of the political or diplomatic front?
Well, I think that the reasonable people in the government of Lebanon and also among the population, they all understand that this is a moment of truth. They will never, ever have a better condition or more convenient ones to really regain the Lebanese government sovereignty and actually kick out the Hezbollah. We have to remember that Hezbollah, as a proxy of Iran, of course, took the entire country hostage. Not only they built a very strong military might, terroristic one, they have actually turned from a terror organization to an army, full-scale army of terror. They were much stronger than the Lebanese army. They also have their roots in the political echelons. They have ministers in the government, they have members of parliament, and they do not care about Lebanese interests, but only Iranians. I think this is more evident now, and there is no lost love between them and the people of Lebanon at large. However, there are still a lot of Shiites in Lebanon that would still sympathize with Hezbollah and Iran. Also, in the Lebanese army, there are many Shiites fighting there. So it's a very convoluted situation where there is no direct command and control of the Lebanese military. This is where we will have to help them. They cannot do it by themselves. They do get help, certainly from Israel, pounding the Hezbollah, hopefully all the way to render them obsolete. We have the Syrian government of al-Julani actually blocking the border between Syria and Lebanon, so to dry them out from supplies that were coming from Iran. And also what Israel is doing now in the last 2 days is also going after the money, following the money, understanding that their economic infrastructure is the one that sustains them. And so long as they will have no access to funds, I think this is where it will be very difficult for them to maintain all their terrorists, all their operatives that get 5 times more as a salary, as a monthly salary, than a Lebanese army soldier. So by doing all this, pounding them militarily, economically, and politically, I think that pretty soon we will see a shift whereby hopefully they will disappear from the political arena in Lebanon.
And Hanan, back to you in terms of the military options. You know, Israel, of course, day 13 of this war with Iran, continuing to strike in Tehran with really historic achievements. But what are Israel's options now as well in terms of Hezbollah, in terms of Lebanon, from a military perspective? Can Israel afford to fight, you know, 2 full fronts of this war, which essentially is what the Islamic regime is hoping, of course?
Yeah, the idea of the Iranian planners is to divert the efforts toward Lebanon, letting Hezbollah make the suicide move. But I believe that we see the combined military action in Tehran, very decisive. Tasks are being divided between the American, the Central Command of America and Israel in a very perfect way. And what right now we see Israel is more taking care of the besieged, the Iranian internal police, to make sure that they will not target the civilians in the case that there will be some more demonstration. While the Americans, we see them working on the Hormuz area, on the economic parts of this campaign, making sure that this block in Hormuz, the economic factor of it, will be minimized or stop it at all. And the big question is right now is as a patient, I would say the word patient, because they expect us, the Iranian, Hezbollah, that we will, and we American will ask for an end game, the exit point, this word that shouldn't be heard in the Middle East because they are the worst word that we should pronounce here, because right then the Iranians say, okay, we have won the war. No, they are not going to win the war. And I believe President Trump make it very clear that he wants to see the Iranians, the Revolutionary Guards, asking for peace, begging for peace. And we are not far from that. I believe that we are making a very, very quick inroads to these situations.
Now, Danny, Hanan mentioned President Trump, and we've heard many sort of conflicting statements from him over the past several days. On the one hand, he said that the United States has pretty much achieved most of its military objectives. There's not much left to target, he said. On the other hand, he said that the operation will continue until all of the objectives are fully met. And it's still unclear whether regime change is one of the goals. It isn't a stated goal, but it's been hinted at by both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, there's also the concern here in Israel that President Trump, in lieu of these statements, could suddenly decide to end the war and sort of announce an end and an American victory. What is your assessment of all of this?
Yes, well, with President Trump, there's no telling, which is part of his strength, because he keeps mostly his enemies, but also friends, keep them guessing. But I would say that so far, and notwithstanding the political pressure on Trump, he stays the course. And I believe he would like to see results. He does not want to be remembered as somebody that did not finish the job. And also, I think that the Iranians are challenging him by some provocation where they actually threatening him of death and of defeat. And I don't think this is the way to treat Trump, so long he has overcome both political pressures from within his own party, within the public arena. And we know that this war is not very popular, to say the least, but he's keeping the course, and I believe he will continue to do that. And with the main concern, of course, is the economy, inflation, oil prices. And with that, he has some remedies with opening the strategic reserves. And probably there will be a strong alliance and cooperation, because here we see, for the first time in many years, we see actually the EU, or most of the countries in the EU, and certainly the strong ones there, France and Germany, and also Britain, behind the Americans. So I think together it's an added, I would say, value that he has for more wherewithal and stamina against the Iranians. The Iranians, we see, they are in a suicidal mode against all their neighbors and against the most powerful militaries in the world. But as we mentioned, with Hezbollah and with the Hamas, they are radical. They rather die or get killed as martyrs, quote unquote, than capitulate. So hopefully they will get their wish.
Absolutely. And I do want to say that the UK and France, it did take them a little bit of time to come around, but they did in the end. Ambassador Danny Ayalon, Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, thank you both so much for your analysis today.
Pleasure.
And today, the war with Iran entered its 13th day, with Israel carrying out some of its most direct strikes yet inside the Iranian capital. The IDF says dozens of Air Force fighter jets struck key regime targets across Tehran and western Iran, including Revolutionary Guard Air Force headquarters, command and control centers, ballistic missile storage sites, and air defense positions. Israel also released footage, it says, shows fighter jets striking Iranian soldiers operating at an IRGC headquarters in central Tehran. The military saying the forces were identified and eliminated within moments. The IDF also struck a compound inside the IRGC's Central Military University, known as Imam Hussein, which the IDF says was being used by regime forces to coordinate operations and to hold command meetings. The military also struck storage and production sites for ready-to-launch ballistic missiles, including missiles intended to target Israeli aircraft operating over Iran. And at the same time, Israel targeted internal security forces, including besieged bases and the headquarters of Iran's intelligence ministry, the regime's primary domestic surveillance and repression agency. Iran's semi-official media reports several besieged and security personnel were killed at checkpoints in northern and southern Tehran. Now, the IDF says these strikes are part of a new phase of the campaign aimed at, quote, deepening the blow to the core systems of the Iranian regime. And joining us now with more on the latest in the war and the situation inside of Iran is Camelia Entekhabifard, editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian. Camelia, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Yes, you did indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So we're on the 13th day. That's one day longer than the war in June, the 12-day war with Iran. And I want to hear from you what your assessment of the war is so far.
Thank you very much for hosting me. Good evening to the region. I was hearing to the other guests, they were describing the frontier, and they were describing that Americans would still continue this combat regardless if President Trump's achieved the goals he is announcing on and off on his statement with the media. I believe that Americans, they reach a stage which they were thinking due to their allies in the region's complaint and their unhappiness and their feel like abandoned by the Americans, not in opposite way. We are hearing why they haven't been joined this combat in opposite way, because they invested a lot in the US and they were hosting American bases in their countries for over than decades. President Trump is under pressure to stop the war. I am seeing some signs of President Trump maybe getting prepared daily basis to stop the war, since he hasn't been speaking at all about regime change, at least in the past week ago. So you just mentioned is the 13th day of the wars. Before President Trump speaking about regime change, and some of the signals indicated, he says there are people inside Iran, they can run better than the outsiders. Indirect messages like the opposition outside Iran are not fit to be backed up by president. Such things, if this is his main goal and aim, and at what he said frequently, the military target has been destroyed, and he announced a victory due to the prices of the oil and all difficulties. The regional countries, American companies, and everyone were suffering. He may even ask the Israelis that to pull out and stop the war, but I shouldn't say that easy will happen. That would be lots of conditions Tehran has to be accept. We are hearing the Turkish and the Pakistanis were mediating between Iran and the US. if Iran wants to also accept this ceasefire, as they were keep saying they would not, the new set and conditions definitely limiting Iran's capabilities and also holding them back from even financing the militia in the region. And everyone knows there is no defense system left for Iran in order in the future, if they want to attack the neighbors or Israel, can be save itself. It's a little complicated, but let me just say a word. But I guess we are reaching the final stage of this war.
And so you say that we might be approaching the final stages of this war. And so I do want to ask you, what is the situation inside of Iran today? I mean, what are you hearing from your contacts? Just today, we saw a video of Iran's new supreme leader, the son of the deceased Ayatollah Khamenei. He has not been seen in public since he gave a speech today with just a picture, and we heard a statement read by a woman, a broadcaster. So, what is happening inside of Iran? Do you think that the United States, as you said, President Trump saying that, the United States has essentially nearly declared victory, do you think that's the case? I mean, what's happening on the ground in Iran?
The message of the new supreme leader is not as important as the act of the Revolutionary Guards, which is holding the power in Iran. It doesn't matter if he's alive, this person is dead, the statement comes from himself or the Revolutionary Guard. Look what the illusion has been created around of this new leadership and how minimum and limited his power effects on Iran, decision-making, the politicians. This is a great example, as what I told you. If this person never appear on TV, Iranian doesn't care. If he appear, they won't care. And the same way, the Revolutionary Guard doesn't care, because from years ago, we never knew the politics played in Iran by the Revolutionary Guards. And it's an interesting question today if we said, maybe Ayatollah Khamenei was also I don't want to say obey, maybe affected or were listening to the Revolutionary Guards rather than to say Revolutionary Guards were obeying to the supreme leader. Revolutionary Guard is very powerful in Iran, and we know that they have many branches in many cities and small villages. There are many associated people working with them. Roughly, we could say around 15 to 20 million supporters they have in Iran. And combating that ideology is very difficult. A good question I can bring that you up is Hamas. For 2 years and a half almost, right? Israelis were fighting with them inside of a very narrow strip of Gaza. But still these people were resisting or still are alive, and still their fighters were not willing to give up their arms. Fighting ideology is difficult, but making changes in the society by investing on culture, by opening the door to the public, which they can have information about changes and reform and about the openness and having businesses with the world is always effective. I am not suggesting this pattern and methodology. It works for Iran because the rest of our society are so sophisticated, they are well educated, and don't forget, Iranians are very nationalistic. There is always one unknown momentum in our society. Iranians get together, stand behind of each other to defend the nation when Iran integrity has been challenged. I believe President Trump understands this, that why the decision of using the courts. We heard many different stories and narratives. Yes, they may want to use them as a ground troop supporting American air defense, so on, and then he pulled back from the decision. I believe that he has an advisor, and there are people were telling him this nation is different than other nations, and it can have a backlash rather than helping him to topple the regime. And this is many reasons I believe President Trump now doesn't want to talk about regime change, and he wants to leave it to Iranian. And I know my people, and I'm hearing from Iran, they don't want anything to impose on them. They are waiting for their own momentum to change the regime, and that has to naturally come to the Iranian rather than by force, which the chaotic situation even is not in the favor of the regional countries too. I'm hearing from the region too, they are very, very disappointed and unhappy, and they are doubtful about the future of Iran and what kind of Iran they have to facing after this war. These scenarios is like an open book in front of President Trump, and I believe very much soon, very, very soon, before Iranian New Year, which is March 21st, he would conclude his final decision about Iran.
And, you know, we are hearing as well that Israel has started what it's called a new phase of the war, targeting the internal suppression forces, the besieged militias. I mean, what can you tell us about this impact inside of Iran? And do you believe this is really going to pave the way for the people to be able to rise up and overthrow the regime?
Yes and no. Yes, because the militants, the bases has been destroyed, and they don't have anywhere to go except, as you said, they be at the street and have their stations or the checkpoint at the street. But the street is a place Iranians also were using for their daily life, for grocery shopping, going to banks, and the life, if I wouldn't say totally stop, at least in Tehran, is like now they have half a traffic. But asking Iranian come to street to get the power or demonstrate, as Israeli officials were saying in the past few days, the right time will come and we will tell you when go to the street. When they are seeing some of these militia are in the civilian clothes, everyone knows under the Revolutionary Guards is Basij, and Basij is like a freelancer associated armed members of the IRGC, which they don't wear the uniform. I can imagine if these people, for having shield and protection, wants to be appear among of the Iranian demonstrators, we can say that would be blood that runs at the streets. Iranians still did not find this trust that when they asked them to come street, they come because the drones were attacking the bases. They are still not feel so safe that these people, which I just tell you a few minutes ago, maybe there are another about 2 million militias having capable holding a gun, they would be among of them. That terms comes to them when the dust has been settled and they can see and review the opportunities. I'm not sure if at this stage, seeing 50 days ago, over than 30,000 Iranian killed, now they want to take another challenges right when the country is at the middle of the war. It's still, this is my prediction, but when it comes to a right time and momentum which they were asking them, we could have another assumption.
Absolutely. Well, Camelia, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing really your unique insights into the situation inside of Iran. Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we continue, a quick word from our partner.
Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
And moving on, Spain has officially withdrawn its ambassador from Israel, deepening a growing diplomatic rift between Madrid and Jerusalem. The ambassador had already been recalled from Tel Aviv last September for consultations after Israel accused Spain of anti-Semitism over policies related to the war in Gaza, and she never returned to her post. But the Spanish government announced that Ambassador Ana Maria Salomon Perez has been formally dismissed from her post following a decree approved by the Council of Ministers and signed by King Felipe VI and the foreign minister. Now, despite the row, Spain says its embassy in Israel will remain open to help evacuate citizens from the region as the conflict continues. Spain has been harshly critical of Israel since the start of the war in Gaza, and the diplomatic break comes amid tensions not only with Israel, but with the United States as well over the war with Iran. Madrid has refused to allow U.S. forces to use jointly operated military bases on Spanish soil for strikes on Iran, a decision that has angered U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump is now publicly calling out Spain. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
No, they're not. I think they're not cooperating at all. Spain, I think they've been very bad, not good at all. We may cut off trade with Spain.
You would guide all trade with them?
I don't know what Spain's doing. They've been very bad to NATO. They get protected. They don't want to pay their fair share. And they've been that way for many years. Let me give you the good news. Let me give you the good news. The people of Spain are fantastic. The leadership, like you. The leadership, not so good.
And of course, Spain is still maintaining close and full diplomatic relations with the Islamic regime in Iran. Not surprising in the least, I think, from Pedro Sanchez's government. Joining us now with more on this break in ties with Spain is Angel Mas, president of ACOM. Angel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So really an unbelievable move from Spain, although I would say not surprising. What can you tell us is behind this decision?
Well, first of all, I think President Trump was very insightful. The Spanish people are not hostile to Israel, much less to the United States. The government is. We have a very radical government, and it's a government that is at the end of the runway. Personal corruption problems are putting a lot of pressure on the prime minister. A prime minister that has always been driven by a mix of radicalism and adventurism. So this is just another bluff. I mean, as you say, the ambassador has been home for the last 6 months. Why announcing this today? Well, it's another way of making a fuss, clickbaiting over active gestures, decoys, tricks, a way to basically confuse the public opinion and to keep on presenting himself as the champion, the international champion of, hostility against the United States and Israel.
And do you think this move will likely see repercussions for Spain? I mean, we heard President Trump say he might cut off trade with Spain. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the question is no longer whether the United States should impose sanctions on Spain. The question is why it took so long. And I'm telling you very sadly, as a Spaniard, Spanish government has spent years and years straining alliances, disrupting defense cooperation, shielding authoritarian regimes. So what a lot of us have been asking was precisely that. Now, sanctions, as President Trump says, the Spanish population is a victim of this very unpopular government, very radical government. So the sanctions should be focused on the companies that facilitate those behaviors, the leaders that cooperate with the prime minister.
And I do want to ask, because we've also seen really rising levels of anti-Semitism in Spain, especially since October 7th. And I know that ACOM, that you have been working on issues such as this long before that as well. Can you share with us sort of what the situation is like for the Jewish community in Spain today?
Well, I want to insist, the Spanish population is not anti-Semitic. If you are publicly identifiable as a Jew in the streets, typically we would not have a problem at all. The recent wave of anti-Semitism is inspired tops down. It comes from the government. It comes from the political circles of power. It comes from media that is subsidized by the government. Of course, that is permeating through some segments of the society, but in general, it's all a subsidized government, a subsidized movement, directed from the government, incited from the power. It's not a grassroots situation. Now, of course, for Jews in Spain, it's tough because when you have the power, the national government that is there to protect minorities, actually inciting hatred against that minority is difficult. We have always been protected by the judiciary, and the judiciary protects us. We have always been protected by the police from extremists and terrorists, and the police protects us. But today, the people in charge of the police are openly, actively hostile, not just against Israel, but against everybody that supports publicly Israel, not just Jews, but Spanish non-Jewish citizens that take this stand. And this, by definition, is a very complicated way of life.
And so I do want to ask, Pedro Sanchez, his government, what does it gain from maintaining close ties to the Islamic Republic? I mean, is it out of fear? Is it due to a policy of appeasement? Or does he and his government, do they truly support the actions of the Islamic regime?
Two things. First of all, there are members of the Spanish government today whose political party was directly financed by the Islamic Republic of Iran as a way to influence the Spanish political system. This is a fact that has been demonstrated, that the police brought up to the courts of justice, and the courts basically said yes, but this was not illegal at the time. So clearly there are political activists that have been earning a salary from the Islamic Republic of Iran that are members of our national government. This is unique across any Western country. As for Sanchez himself and his closest circle, again, he's surrounded by massive political scandals. He has always put his political survival ahead of the strategic interests of Spain or its reputation. He continues his doubling down of his support of any causes or any situations that could create internal conflict, could mobilize his most radical support base, and could distract the rest of the public opinion from the very, very pressing corruption situations that he has to face.
I see. And, you mentioned that he's at the end of the rope, end of the line. I mean, what's next for Spain? Are there elections coming up? I mean, what can you share with those who may not be in tune to the political climate inside of Spain?
Well, the first thing to tell everybody is that Pedro Sanchez never won an election. He lost the elections, but created a Frankenstein coalition of, very hard right nationalists in the Basque Country and in Catalonia with, pro-Iranian hard left parties. So the opposition actually represents the majority of the Spaniards, but he doesn't want to call elections because he knows that he's a very unpopular leader and he would lose those elections. the future for Spain, obviously, is a change of regime, if I may say that, now that we're talking about Iran, a regime that realigns us with the West, that realigns us with our national interests in the western side of the Mediterranean, that aligns us with our closest allies, that is the United States. And by the way, you know, Prime Minister Sanchez has been taking advantage of the fact that Spain has been flying below the radar screen internationally for a long time. We were part of the EU. We would follow whatever the Germans and the French said, and his extremist positions would be, disguised in that reality. Now he has taken a leading position in the hostility against the US, and that is making that some of the European leaders are taking notice of that and are realizing that he's actually a liability for the EU and for their own country's relationship with the US. So this is affecting Spain, not just vis-a-vis the US and of course Israel, but vis-a-vis the EU and its main countries.
Absolutely. So hopefully a better future in store for Spain and Spanish-Israel relations. Ángel Mas, thank you so much for joining us and for breaking it down for us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And before we go, for now, you can get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel, breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurately. And don't forget to join us here on Saturday night for special live coverage of the weekend's events. That's a wrap for this special edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm Lidar Lazi. Thank you so much for watching and keep safe.
Welcome to this special edition of ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the latest developments on this day 12 of the U.S. and Israel's war